Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the strictest, most guilt-soaked corners of American childhood. What it actually meant to be a girl in a 1950s Catholic school, run by nuns, measured in inches, and graded on the state of your soul. Not with lectures, not with detention slips, not with a stern little note sent home to your mother. No, with wooden rulers, memorized answers, and a small cardboard box that let your whole class pool its nickels and buy a baby. Before we begin, I'm so glad you decided to spend this stretch of the night with me. If these sleepy histories have ever carried you off before, tap subscribe to keep them coming, and tell me down in the comments the one rule from your own childhood classroom that you still cannot quite shake. Somewhere out there, a fully grown adult still flinches at the word kneel. Now settle in properly. Dim the lamp, let the fan murmur, pull the covers somewhere soft and warm, and slouch as much as you like, because tonight, for once, no one is walking the aisle to check your posture. Ever wondered how a single nun kept 60 children in total silence armed with nothing but a small wooden cricket? What it felt like to kneel on the floor so a grown woman could measure the distance between your hem and the ground? Why anyone thought to warn small girls that their shiny shoes might reflect straight up? How you were meant to confess your sins by exact number when your worst crime all week was fighting with your brother? And why a visiting bishop ended his blessing by lightly slapping you across the cheek? Congratulations, you just woke up in parochial America, 1955. Your skirt has already been measured. Your left hand has been quietly retired. There is a box at the front of the room waiting for your nickel, an invisible angel keeping score over your shoulder, and a woman whose real name you will never learn is about to raise one finger and point it into the room. Good luck. You arrive in the schoolyard before the first bell, and the first thing you do is find your place in line, not a line you choose. A line that has already been decided, by grade, by height, by some logic, only the sisters fully understand. You stand with your hands at your sides and your mouth closed, because talking in line is its own small offence, and sister is already at the top of the steps watching the whole yard resolve itself into rows. Then she lifts one hand, and everyone waits for the sound. The sound is a small wooden click, and it runs the entire yard. One click, and every spine straightens. 2 clicks, and the lines begin to move toward the door. It is a device that fits in the palm, a little cricket of wood and metal, and in the hand of Sister Mary Aloysius it carries the authority of a fire alarm. She does not raise her voice. She has retired her voice entirely. The clicker does the shouting for her, and the clicker never gets tired, never goes hoarse, never wakes up on the wrong side of the convent. It simply clicks, and 200 children obey it like a field of extremely devout pigeons. You've learned the whole grammar of that clicker. There is the crisp double click that means proceed, the single sharp one that means stop exactly where you are, and a third click, harder than the rest. That means someone has done something and everyone is now going to stand in the cold until it is sorted out. You can read her whole morning in the pressure of her thumb. A soft click is a merciful, easygoing, generous day. A click like a rifle bolt means keep your eyes forward and your mouth sealed. The line itself is a small society with rules older than you are. You do not pick your spot. You are sorted by grade, and then by height, shortest to tallest, so the whole school stacks up into neat ascending rows like a bar chart nobody asked to be part of. The girl in front of you is Patricia, who stands exactly 1 inch taller, and takes the responsibility gravely, squaring her shoulders each morning as though she is about to be photographed for a recruitment poster. Behind you is a boy who is not permitted to be near you for reasons no one explains, held a careful arm's length back, in his own separate line entirely. Talking is the great temptation and the great crime. The yard is packed with children and almost perfectly silent, which is an unnatural thing to arrange. 200 bodies, quiet, orderly, and vaguely terrified, breathing steam into the cold. The silence has a texture. You can hear the flag rope tapping the pole, a bus 2 streets over, the scuff of 40 pairs of Oxfords settling into place, and into that silence a single whisper travels like a dropped dinner plate. Dolores tries it most mornings, a low remark out of the corner of her mouth, and most mornings the clicker finds her before the sentence is even finished. Then the double click comes, and the whole yard exhales into motion. You cross the threshold 2 by 2, and at the door you dip, a quick genuflect toward the small statue in its alcove, done so many thousand times that your knee bends on its own like a hinge that has stopped arguing. The child who forgets to dip is sent back to do it again, in front of the moving line, which is its own quiet catastrophe. Inside, the noise you are not allowed to make presses against the inside of your chest and stays there. You will carry it all morning. You let a little out at recess and swallow the rest. The clicker goes back into the deep pocket of the habit where it waits. It will return for prayers, and again for the walk to church, and again at dismissal, because the whole day is built around that small, dry sound, and you have never once been allowed to hold it. You are wearing the uniform because everyone is wearing the uniform, and this morning that is not quite enough. Sister walks the aisle slowly, and when she reaches your desk, she says one word, kneel. So you kneel, right there on the wooden floor beside your seat, and you wait while she looks at the hem of your skirt and the distance between that hem and the ground. The distance is the whole point. There is a correct number of inches, and your knees are how she measures it. The rule is that the hem must touch the floor when you kneel, or come within a stated distance of it, and the stated distance is not up for negotiation. 2 inches below the knee is the whispered standard, though the true standard is whatever Sister Mary Ignatius decides it is on any given morning. She carries the measurement in her eye the way a carpenter carries a level, and she does not need a ruler, though she owns one, and it is not only for skirts. The skirt itself is treated as a suspect. A hem is a living thing to a growing girl, creeping upward an inch a season as your legs get longer and the fabric does not, and the sisters watch that creep like it is a personal betrayal. When you fail the test, nothing dramatic happens. You are simply told to let the hem down, and your mother spends an evening with a seam ripper undoing last year's work, because a skirt that rode up when you knelt is a skirt that has opinions about modesty, and those opinions are wrong. The reasoning is never fully explained, but you absorb it anyway. The uniform is supposed to do several jobs at once. It is meant to make you modest, plain and interchangeable, so no one can tell the doctor's daughter from the dockworker's daughter by looking. In theory, this is a kindness, a way of erasing the cruelty of who can afford what. In practice, it also means your entire body has become school property, subject to inspection, correction, and the occasional public kneel. Dolores, who cannot leave a rule untested, once turned her waistband over twice to shorten her skirt on the walk to school, then turned it back before the door. She was caught anyway, because Sister Mary Ignatius can smell a folded waistband from across a classroom the way a bloodhound smells a ham. Dolores spent the morning with the hem let down and her face very red, and the lesson landed on all of us without a single ruler being lifted. There is a story, passed between the girls in the coat line, about shiny shoes. The story says that patent leather is forbidden because the polished surface will reflect upward and show a boy what is under your skirt. No one has ever actually seen this happen. Physics has never once cooperated. But the story is repeated so seriously by so many people that it takes on the weight of law, and half the girls in your grade genuinely believe their own shoes are plotting against them. You kneel, and you pass, this time. The floor is cold through your stockings and the varnish smells faintly of the janitor's wax, and you stay down until she nods, because standing before the nod is its own small offence. Then you rise and smooth your skirt and slide back into your seat, and the girl across the aisle takes her turn on the boards. What stays with you is not the discomfort, it is the arithmetic. You have learned, before you can do long division, that your goodness can be measured in inches, that a hemline is a moral quantity, and that a woman with a ruler and a habit will always know your number better than you do. You tug the hem toward your ankles out of pure reflex, a gesture you will still catch yourself making at 40 in a room with no nuns in it at all. You start every morning the same way, standing beside your desk with your hands folded before you have taken off your coat properly. First the prayer, then the pledge, then more prayer, in an order that never changes and never will. Some of the words are in Latin, and you say them without fully knowing what each one means, because knowing what it means was never the assignment. Saying it correctly was. The room speaks in one voice, 60 children at once, and your own voice disappears cleanly into the middle of it. The morning offering comes first, the little prayer that hands the whole coming day to God in advance, every joy, every suffering, every arithmetic worksheet, offered up before you have so much as sharpened a pencil. You are giving away a day you have not lived yet, sight unseen, the way you might sign a contract you are far too young to read. Then the flag, then the pledge, because you are also being raised into a country, and in 1955 the country and the church are marching in the same direction, and both of them are pointed firmly at the communists. The unison is the thing that stays with you. 60 voices reciting the same words at the same pace produce a sound that is not quite talking and not quite singing, a low collective drone that fills the room to the corners. The effect is so total the room could rent itself out as a monastery. You learn to ride it. You learn where to breathe and where the whole class slows down and where it speeds up, and you never lead and you never lag, because a voice that comes in half a beat late sticks out like a sour note in a hymn, and Sister's head turns toward it instantly. The Latin is its own strange comfort. You are handed a missal, a thick little book with the Latin printed on one page and the English facing it, and you follow along at Mass tracking 2 languages you do not fully control. Nobody sits you down to explain the grammar. You absorb the sounds the way you absorb the words of a song on the radio, complete and confident and not entirely understood, and you can rattle off whole prayers in a dead language while remaining a little fuzzy on what you have just requested. Sister Mary Vincent runs the opening like a conductor who has misplaced her baton and made peace with using a piece of chalk instead. She stands at the front, chalk raised, and brings it down on the first syllable, and the room comes in together. When a straggler drifts, the chalk pauses in the air, held perfectly still, patient and menacing, until the offender rejoins the herd. She has never once had to say a name. The paused chalk says it for her. The radiator bangs along underneath all of it, wildly out of rhythm, the one thing in the room that refuses to submit to the schedule. It hisses and knocks and occasionally lets out a long metallic groan right in the middle of the Hail Mary, and nobody laughs, because laughing during prayer is a special category of trouble, but 60 children feel the laugh pass through the room like a current and hold it down by force. Then it is over, and you finally get to take off your coat. The whole thing has taken perhaps 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes you have prayed, pledged, offered up your entire day, and located your place in an order that stretches from your desk up to the flag, up to the tabernacle, up past the ceiling to somewhere you are told is watching. You sit. You fold your hands on the desk, thumbs crossed the approved way, and the ordinary day, the one with spelling and sums in it, begins on top of the sacred one like a second coat of paint, still slightly wet. You are holding a small book with a blue cover, and inside it are questions, and under each question is exactly one answer that you are expected to have memorized word for word. Who made us? Why did God make us? Sister reads the question and points, and whoever she points at stands and delivers the answer, all of it in order, with no words missing and no words added. You do not explain the answer. You do not discuss it. You produce it, whole, the moment her finger lands on you. The book is the Baltimore Catechism, and it has been the same book for 70 years, which means your mother learned these exact answers from these exact questions, and so did her mother, in the same flat, correct, unarguable, and slightly ominous phrasing. Who made us? God made us. Why did God make us? To know Him, to love Him, and to serve Him in this world, and to be happy with Him forever in the next. You can say it in your sleep. You will, in fact, still be able to say it decades from now, long after you have forgotten the multiplication tables and your own locker combination. The method has no soft edges. You are not asked what you think, because what you think is not evidence and is not on the test. The answer exists, complete and finished, sitting in the book like a stone, and your job is to move that stone from the page into your head and keep it there. A right answer earns a nod. A wrong answer, or a stumbled one, or a paraphrase that means the same thing but uses different words, earns a correction and another go, because the words themselves are holy, and a synonym is a kind of trespassing. Sister Mary Bernard runs the drill like a woman firing a nail gun. Question, point, answer, next. Question, point, answer, next. She does not go in order down the rows, because order would let you count ahead and relax when your turn has passed. So she jumps, unpredictable and quick, her finger landing on a boy in the back, then a girl in the front, then the child who was just praying she would not come around again. You sit slightly forward the whole time, the answer already loaded behind your teeth. The strange part is how much of it you come to love, in the way you love anything you are genuinely good at. There is a clean, cold satisfaction in delivering a long answer perfectly, every clause in its slot, and sitting back down to a small nod. It is the satisfaction of a coin dropping exactly into the slot of a machine. You are a child, and you are being trained to feel proud of accurate recall and slightly ashamed of original thought, and the training takes beautifully. By spring, the whole first section lives in you, and Sister Mary Bernard tests it cold, jumping her finger down the rows while the answers come out fast and flat and word perfect. 60 children reciting the purpose of their own existence in the brisk, even, and unbothered tone of a conductor calling train stops, and none of it invites a single question. George, who is brave or foolish, once raised his hand and asked why, if God made us to be happy with him forever, he also made a place like hell. Sister Mary Bernard looked at him for a long, level moment, the kind of look that could curdle milk, and told him that the answer to his question was to memorize the answer to the question, which was not an answer at all, and everyone understood that perfectly. George sat down. The finger resumed its jumping. And you learned, without anyone stating it, that the catechism was a door you were meant to walk through, not a window you were allowed to open. You are learning to write, and learning to write means filling page after page with the same shapes, rows of connected ovals, rows of straight up and down strokes. Sister counts out loud, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, and your hand is supposed to move to that count, not from your fingers but from your whole forearm, gliding across the paper in a motion you have been told is correct. The letters barely matter yet. What matters is the rhythm, and the fact that your loops match the loops of every child around you. The system has a name, the Palmer method, and it is treated less like a handwriting style and more like a moral discipline. The theory is that beautiful writing comes from the arm, not the hand. So your fingers are supposed to stay stiff and your forearm is supposed to do the rowing, and Sister Mary Gertrude walks the aisles making sure no one is cheating with their knuckles. She can spot a finger writer at 20 paces. She rests 2 fingertips lightly on the back of a moving hand to feel whether the motion is coming from the right muscles, the way a doctor feels for a pulse. Except the diagnosis is always the same and the cure is more ovals. The ovals never end. You make them in tight, patient, overlapping loops, hundreds to a page, until the row looks like a coiled spring lying on its side. Then the push-pulls, straight strokes up and down without lifting the pen, marching across the paper like a tiny picket fence. None of it spells anything. It is exercise, pure and unglamorous, calisthenics for the writing arm, and you do it every single day until the motion lives in your body and not your mind. The pen makes it worse and better at once. You write with a steel nib dipped from an inkwell sunk into the corner of your desk, a small well of dark liquid positioned exactly where a careless elbow will find it. The nib has moods. Press too hard and it splays and spatters. Press too soft and it skips and goes dry. It catches on the upstroke and floods on the down, and a single lifted thumb at the wrong moment leaves a fat blue tear rolling across an otherwise perfect line. A blot is a small tragedy. A blot means the whole page again. Lois, who sits by the window, once knocked her inkwell clean over during the 2 and 2 count, and a slow blue lake spread across her desk and into her lap and onto the floor, silent and unstoppable, like the tide coming in on a very bad afternoon. She did not move. She had learned that sudden movement only spreads the disaster faster. She simply sat in the rising ink with the face of a small martyr, waiting for Sister Mary Gertrude to arrive with rags and a verdict. And yet you get good at it. That is the thing no one warns you about. After enough months, the ovals stop being torture and start being almost pleasant, a warm looping rhythm you can fall into, and your letters come out even, slanted and confident, connected in one flowing line like a ribbon unspooling. The handwriting that results is genuinely lovely. The oval that tortured you in September is, by June, the most natural motion your hand knows. Your letters come out in one even ribbon, slanted and sure, and Sister Mary Gertrude passes your desk without stopping, which is the highest praise the Palmer method allows. The beauty is real. So is the price. Both of them arrive in the same fountain of blue ink, on the same cold mornings, one patient oval at a time, and you blot your final line and lift the page to the grey window light, and it is, against all odds, lovely. You reach for your pen with the hand that feels natural, and that is the problem. It is the left hand, and the left hand is not allowed to lead. Sister moves the pen to your right hand, gently the first time, less gently the second, and you are expected to learn to write all over again with the hand that does not want to cooperate. Your letters come out shaky and wrong, and that is treated as progress, because the goal was never good handwriting. The goal was the correct hand. The objection to the left hand is old and never fully spoken. The word itself gives it away, if you know Latin, and eventually you will, because sinister is simply the Latin for left, and centuries of people decided that a word meaning left could also mean crooked, unlucky, and wrong. Nobody explains this to you in the classroom. They do not need to. The prejudice arrives fully assembled, treated as obvious, the way it is obvious that you face the front and stand for the prayer, so your left hand becomes a small daily criminal. It reaches, out of pure instinct, for the pen, the crayon, the spoon at lunch, and every time it reaches it is corrected. Sometimes the correction is a word, sometimes it is a light slap on the knuckles. In the stricter rooms down the hall, the left hand is tucked away entirely, pinned under the leg or held behind the back or, in the stories the older girls tell, tied loosely to the chair with a ribbon so it cannot participate in the crime of being useful. Bernadette is left-handed and stubborn about it in the quietest possible way. She writes with her right hand when Sister Mary Gertrude is watching and slides the pencil back to her left the instant the black habit turns toward the blackboard, producing two entirely different handwritings depending on the angle of surveillance. One is upright and obedient and ugly. The other is her own, quick and slanted and alive, and she keeps it hidden like a coin sewn into a hem. The strangeness is that no one thinks any of this is cruel. Your own parents agree with it. A left-handed child is understood to have a small defect that a firm school will helpfully correct, the way it might correct a slouch or a mumble, and a mother whose daughter is being switched to the right hand is more likely to say thank you than to complain. The whole world is pointed the same direction, and the direction is right, and your hand is simply out of step with the world. Some children convert cleanly. Some never do. The ones who never do carry it for life in odd, quiet ways. A stammer that arrived the same year the hand did, a knot of dread around a blank page, a right-handed signature that never quite feels like their own name. The connection is never proven and never discussed, and the sisters would be genuinely wounded to hear it suggested, because they meant it kindly. They believed they were smoothing a child into the shape the world required, sanding down a crooked, awkward, inconvenient edge so you would fit. You do fit, mostly. You learn to write with the right hand, and the letters even out over the years, and by the time you are grown no one meeting you would ever guess. But your left hand remembers. It still reaches first for the heavy thing, still wants the fork, still drifts toward the pen when you are tired and not thinking. A small, loyal creature that was told for 8 years it was wrong, and never entirely believed it. And every so often, deciding which hand to catch a falling glass with, you feel the old argument flicker, decided long ago in a room that smelled of chalk by a woman who was certain she was helping. You spend a good part of the day on your feet, because in this classroom answering a question means standing to deliver it. The spelling words, the times tables, the capitals, the parts of speech, all of it comes out of you while you are standing beside your desk with the whole room listening. There is no raising a hand and murmuring from your seat. You rise, you speak clearly, and you sit only when you are told. Getting it wrong while standing feels different from getting it wrong quietly. Everyone is a witness. The standing is not decoration. It is the method. A child on her feet cannot slump into the crowd and hope to be forgotten, cannot half answer under her breath, cannot hide behind the shoulders of the row ahead. You are up, visible, on the record, and your voice has to carry to the back wall, or sister will ask you to say it again, louder, which is its own small punishment. Confidence gets trained into you whether you have any or not, one recitation at a time. The drills come fast and cover everything. 7 times 8, and you had better not count on your fingers, because fingers are a confession that you do not truly know it. The capital of Ohio. The past participle of to swim. Spell necessary, spell rhythm, spell Wednesday, that treacherous word with the silent letter lying in wait like a loose stare. You spell it standing, out loud, one letter at a time, and the room hears every letter, and the one you get wrong hangs in the air for a second before sister moves on to the next child, who nails it, which somehow stings more than any correction. There is a competitive version, the spelling bee, and it turns the whole thing into a small bloodless duel. The class stands in a long row along the wall, and Sister Mary Bernard fires words down the line, and a miss sends you back to your seat, defeated, while the survivors close ranks and keep going. Angela is the one to beat. Angela spells the way other children breathe, effortless and annoying, and she folds her hands in front of her between turns with the serene patience of a girl who has already read the last page of the book and knows how it ends. What the standing builds, underneath the fear, is real. You come out of these years able to spell, to figure a sum in your head, to stand up in a room full of people and say a thing clearly without your voice shaking apart. Those are not small gifts. Public schools 2 blocks away are not producing children who can do this, and everyone knows it, and it is a quiet point of parish pride that the parochial kids can rattle off the tables and diagram a sentence in their sleep. But the cost rides along with the gift. You also come out with a lifelong flinch, a small cold drop in the stomach whenever you are asked to perform on command, a sense that being wrong is not a step toward learning but a public failure witnessed by the whole room and the ceiling and whatever is above the ceiling. The 2 things are welded together and cannot be pulled apart, the clear, confident, and carrying voice, and the fear underneath it that produced the clarity in the first place. You sit when you are told, and the next name is called. The girl beside you stands, and you feel the familiar mix of relief that it is not you and sympathy that it is her, the whole room breathing in the same rhythm of dodge and dread. Somewhere in the middle of it, without meaning to, you learn the capital of every state, the tables up to 12, and the exact, sharp, permanent feeling of getting something wrong in front of people who will remember. All of it delivered standing up, in a plaid jumper, before you were old enough to know it was being installed. You never know when it is coming, which is exactly how it is designed. Sister is asking questions, moving down some invisible path through the room, and at any moment her hand can rise and one finger can find you. When it does, the answer needs to already be in your mouth. There is no time to think, no time to catch up, no gentle warm-up. You are either ready or you are caught. So you sit through every lesson slightly forward in your seat, alert in a way that has nothing to do with curiosity. And sometimes the finger does not want a spoken answer. Sometimes it points at the long blackboard at the front and means come up here and work it where we can all see. This is the higher tier of exposure, the one that empties your stomach, because now you have to leave the safety of your desk and walk the length of the room and stand with your back to 60 pairs of eyes and solve the thing in public, in chalk, with your hand slightly shaking. The board is enormous and cold and slightly greasy under the chalk, and the chalk itself is a small traitor. It squeaks when you press wrong, sending a shiver down the whole class, and it snaps in half if you bear down in panic, and it writes pale and ghostly if you go too light, so that Sister tells you to press harder, and the pressing brings back the squeal. You carry your sum up the board digit by digit, carrying the tens, borrowing from the hundreds, aware that every child behind you can see the exact moment your confidence fails. The worst part is the eraser. If you get it wrong, you do not simply move on. You erase it, in front of everyone, dragging the felt block through your own mistake in a cloud of chalk dust, wiping the evidence away slowly while the room watches your error disappear. Then you try again, or worse, you are sent back to your seat and another child is called up to fix it, walking past you the way one might walk past a small accident on the road. Walter is the boy who never seems to mind. He ambles to the board with his hands in his pockets and works the problem in big, loopy numbers, humming almost, and even when he gets it wrong, he shrugs and erases and tries again as though the whole thing were happening to somebody else. You study him the way you might study a person who has learned to hold a snake, half admiring, half certain it will bite him eventually. The genius of the surprise is that it never lets you rest. The unready ones are found out constantly. A boy 2 rows over is watching the radiator when his name comes, and the silence that follows is enormous. 3 full seconds of a child with nothing at all behind his teeth while the whole room holds still, quietly grateful it is him and not them. You have been that silence once, months ago, and the memory of it still straightens your spine. You do not intend to be it again. The finger drops. A name that is not yours is called. You feel the private flood of relief, quickly, and then you reload, because her path through the room is invisible and you might be next. And being next is a thing you have to survive several times a day. So you settle forward onto the hard edge of your seat, the answer already loaded behind your teeth, one ear turned toward her the way a small animal keeps an ear on the tree line, watching a hand that can rise at any second, and a piece of chalk that always squeaks at the worst possible moment. You learn early that mistakes have a physical price, and the price is usually measured out with a wooden ruler. Talk out of turn, forget your homework, slouch, whisper, and the ruler comes down across your knuckles or the flat of your open hand. It is not hidden and it is not rare. It happens in front of everyone, in the middle of the ordinary day, and then the lesson simply continues. You hold your hand a certain way afterward, and you do not cry if you can help it, because crying is understood to be a separate matter entirely. The ruler is not the only instrument, just the most famous. There is the wooden pointer, longer and more serious, used to tap the map and occasionally to tap a child. There is the piece of chalk, thrown with an accuracy that suggests genuine talent, sailing across the room to bounce off the head of a daydreamer with a soft, humiliating tock. There is the eraser, felt and wood, which travels the same route and leaves a small ghost of chalk dust on your hair as a receipt. The classroom is quietly full of things that can be aimed at you. The ruler itself develops a personality in your mind, the way a dentist's drill does. It lives on Sister Mary Aloysius' desk when it is not working, lying there in plain sight, patient, wooden, and faintly smug, a tool that is technically for measuring and everyone understands is not mostly for measuring. She picks it up without hurry. That is the part that stays with you, the lack of hurry, the way the whole thing is administered like a chore that simply has to be done before the reading lesson can continue. What makes it survivable, strangely, is how ordinary it is. Nobody in the room thinks they are witnessing something terrible, because it is happening in every classroom on the hall, and it happened to your mother, and it will happen to you on a day you have not yet earned, but certainly will. It is weather. You do not take it personally any more than you take a cold snap personally. You simply learn to keep your homework done, and your mouth closed, and your knuckles, when possible, out of range. The cruelest version is not even the pain, it is the waiting. When Thomas gets caught passing a note, Sister does not strike immediately. She finishes her sentence. She walks the note to the front and reads it, slowly, to herself, while Thomas stands beside his desk turning a remarkable shade of grey. Then she folds it, sets it down, and calls him up, and the whole class has spent 4 full minutes rehearsing the moment along with him. The dread does more work than the ruler ever could, and she knows it, and she spends it like a woman who has all the time in the world. And here is the part that curdles it. And set number, if you go home and complain, you are very unlikely to find an ally. The prevailing wisdom in your kitchen is that Sister does not punish without reason, so if she punished you, you must have done something, and the family conclusion is a second helping of the same medicine for embarrassing everyone. The school and the home are pointed the same direction, sealed, agreed, and unified, and there is no crack between them for a child to slip a complaint through, so you carry it quietly, the way you carry most things. You rub your knuckles under the desk where no one can see, and you decide, privately, that you will simply be too careful to get caught, a resolution you will break by Thursday because you are 7, and being careful for an entire week is beyond any human child. The ruler goes back on the desk. The reading lesson resumes exactly where it paused, and you turn the page with a hand that stings, having learned a lesson that has nothing at all to do with the story you are now reading aloud. You discover that not every punishment is fast. Some of them take the whole afternoon. You are kept after the others leave to fill a page with the same sentence written over and over, promising in your own hand not to do the thing you did. Or you are sent to stand in the corner with your back to the room, present but erased, while the lesson goes on without you. The point is not pain exactly. The point is time and shame, and the slow understanding that the classroom can hold you in place. The lines are their own peculiar torture. You write, "I must not talk during the lesson 100 times," and by the 40th your hand aches and the words have stopped meaning anything, dissolving into pure shape, a chant made of ink. There is a temptation to cheat by holding 2 pencils at once, and there is always some child who tries it, and there is always a nun who has been watching that particular trick get attempted since before you were born. The lines are supposed to reform you. Mostly they teach you that your own promise, repeated to exhaustion, is worth exactly nothing, which is a strange lesson to install in a person. The corner does a different job. Standing with your nose more or less to the wall, your back to 60 classmates, you are still in the room but subtracted from it, a small monument to whatever you did wrong. You cannot see the lesson, but you can hear it, going on cheerfully without you, and the message is unmistakable. The class does not need you. The class is fine. You are a decoration now, a small, silent, and cautionary shape in the corner, and the minutes crawl by on their hands and knees. Then there is the far end of the scale, the punishment the older girls speak of in hushed, thrilled, appalled voices: kneeling. Not the quick kneel of the skirt test, but a long one, on the hard floor, sometimes for the better part of an hour, and in the versions that have hardened into legend, kneeling on a scatter of dry rice or beans pressed into the wood so the grains bite little rings into your knees. Whether it happened in your room or only down the hall or only in the story, everyone believes it completely, and the belief alone keeps a certain kind of order. Gloria once served the corner and the lines in the same afternoon, a rare double for the crime of laughing during the rosary. She stood her corner with tremendous dignity, chin up, the picture of a girl who regrets nothing, and then sat and wrote her 100 lines in beautiful Parma script, each one identical, as though signing a very long and very boring treaty. She told us afterward it was worth it. We did not believe her, but we admired the claim. Gloria, an old hand at the corner by now, has worked out how to tell time without a clock. She counts the clanks of the radiator, times the janitor's mop as it squeaks down the hall and back, and watches the bar of window light crawl across the floorboards toward the leg of the teacher's desk. When the light touches the desk, the afternoon is nearly served. It is the only clock she is allowed, and she reads it the way a prisoner reads a wall. The afternoon light moves across the floor while you write. Eventually the page is full, or the clock releases you, or sister decides the corner has done its work, and you are folded quietly back into the ordinary room, as though nothing happened, expected to pick up the lesson at exactly the point the rest of the class has reached. Nobody mentions it again. You gather your things at dismissal with everyone else, your hand cramped, your knees remembering, and you walk out into the yard having learned, one more time, that the smallest unit of punishment in this place is not the ruler at all. It is the hour. You bring home a report card, and the part your parents look at first is not arithmetic. It is the column for conduct, the one that grades how you behaved, how you sat, whether you were obedient and neat and quiet. A high mark in spelling will not save you if the deportment grade is low, because in this world how you act is scored as seriously as what you know. Your mother reads that column carefully, then hands you a pen so you can watch her sign the card that just judged you. The card itself is a small, solemn document, a folded thing with your name in Parma script across the top and a grid of subjects down the side. Reading, arithmetic, geography, penmanship, and then the two columns that carry the real weight, conduct and effort. Or sometimes they are called deportment and application, dressed up in longer words to sound more like a court proceeding, which in effect they are. A child can be brilliant and still receive a low mark in conduct, and everyone understands that the low mark is the one that will be discussed at the dinner table. What gets graded in that column is enormous and vague. Not just whether you talked out of turn, but whether you were reverent, cooperative and cheerful, whether your posture pleased, whether your desk was tidy, whether you accepted correction without sulking. It is a grade for the state of your character as observed by a woman across a room of 60, distilled into a single letter, and the single letter follows you home and sits on the kitchen table like a small verdict awaiting sentencing. Sister Mary Vincent fills these out in a fine, even hand, and she does not soften them. A child who has been a genuine trial all quarter does not get a generous conduct grade as a kindness, because the grade is understood to be honest information the parents have a right to, an early warning system for a soul heading in the wrong direction. Mercy lives elsewhere, in confession, on Sundays. The report card is not where mercy is kept. The signature is the sting in the tail. You do not simply receive the card. You carry it home, present it, and then stand there while a parent reads it and signs the bottom to prove they saw it, and you carry the signed card back to school as evidence. There is no version where the bad grade quietly disappears. The system has closed every exit. The card goes home, gets read, gets signed, comes back, a small loop with no slack in it, engineered by people who were children once themselves and remember exactly which tricks a child would try. Frances forged her mother's signature exactly one time. She practiced it for an evening, produced a shaky, careful, entirely unconvincing version of her mother's name, and Sister Mary Vincent looked at it for about 1 second before setting it down and asking Frances, very quietly, whether her mother had recently learned to write with someone else's hand. The forgery earned Frances more trouble than the original grade ever would have, at school and then, once the truth reached the kitchen, at home. She became a small legend, the girl who tried to beat the loop, and the loop won, the way the loop always wins. You take your pen and you watch your mother sign. Her signature is real and practiced and final, and she hands the card back to you without much comment, because the comment will come later, and you slide it into your book bag next to your lunch, and your missal, and your stack of holy cards. 4 subjects you did well in, 1 column you did not. And you already know, walking to school with the signed card in your bag, which of the 5 is the one that will still be remembered by supper. You spend your days learning to read one particular face, and it is not an easy face to read. Sister wears the full habit, so you see only the centre of her expression, and you have no idea how old she is or what her name was before it became the name of a saint. What you can learn is her weather, the set of her mouth, the speed of her steps, whether the clicker comes down sharp or soft. Knowing her mood before she announces it becomes a genuine survival skill, practiced daily. The habit hides almost everything, and that is part of its power. A stiff white frame around the face, a veil over the hair you are certain must be there and half suspect is not, a long black gown that turns walking into gliding, so she seems to move without feet. Her hands and her face are the only parts of her the world is allowed to see, which means her hands and her face have to carry every signal, and you become an expert reader of both, the way sailors learn to read a sky that will not speak in words. Her age is a genuine mystery, and the mystery unsettles you more than you can explain. She could be 23 or 60. There is no grey hair to check, no lines to count around a hairline you cannot see, nothing but the smooth, stern, and ageless oval of the face, and a voice that gives away less than you would think. A woman with no visible age is a slightly frightening thing to a child, because you cannot place her, cannot guess how much give there might be in her, cannot decide whether she is closer to your mother or your grandmother or something older than both. So you study the tells. A pencil tapping means the patience is running low. A long pause with the chalk held still means someone is about to be named. When she pinches the bridge of her nose beneath her glasses, the whole front row quietly braces, because that particular gesture has preceded more than one very long afternoon. You read her the way you might read a barometer, and you adjust your own behaviour to the pressure, going still and small when the needle drops. The strange thing is that inside all that armour there is a person, and every so often she leaks out. Sister Mary Bernard, who fires catechism questions like a nail gun, once laughed at a genuinely funny wrong answer, a real laugh, surprised out of her before she could catch it, and the whole room stared as though a statue had sneezed. For 1 second she was clearly a human woman who found something funny, and then the frame closed again and the drill resumed, but you had seen it, and you never quite forgot that it was in there. You learn there are kind ones and hard ones, and they wear the same habit. The uniform of the order erases the difference on the outside, so the gentle sister and the terrifying one glide down the same hall in the same black gown, looking, to a stranger, identical. Only the children know which is which. You trade the information like weather reports between grades, who is soft and who is thunder, which room you would survive and which you would merely endure, a whole oral map of temperaments hidden inside a set of women who are supposed to be interchangeable. And you get good at it, this reading. You get so good that you can call her weather before she declares it, going still and small a half second before the storm arrives, folded quietly into your seat where the pencil tapping cannot find you. It is a strange thing to become an expert in, a single unreadable face, and you practice it every single day across a cold classroom, studying a woman whose whole vocation is to give nothing away, and who, most mornings, succeeds completely. You answer a hard question correctly, or you finish your work first, and Sister rewards you with a small card. On the front is a saint in soft colours, and on the back is a prayer, and to you it is a prize worth more than candy. You keep your cards flat and clean, and you know exactly which ones you have. At recess, a whole economy runs on them, a trade of saints for saints. This martyr for that virgin, negotiated as seriously as anything the adults do with actual money. The cards are small, roughly the size of a playing card, printed in the soft, gilded, faintly melancholy colours of Catholic devotion. A saint gazes upward on the front, robes flowing, eyes brimming, a lily or a sword or a small tame lamb tucked into the composition. On the back is a printed prayer, and often the saint's specialty, because saints have specialties the way doctors do, one for lost things, one for hopeless cases, one for throats, one for travellers, a whole heavenly directory of whom to call for what. And because Sister hands them out for merit, they become the coin of the classroom. A perfect spelling test might earn you a card. A right answer nobody else could give might earn you a card. Good behaviour across a whole difficult week, the kind that costs a fidgety child real effort, might earn you a card, and so the little saints become a running scoreboard of your virtue, accumulating in a banded stack you count in bed at night, the way a tiny banker counts a tiny fortune. The recess market is where it gets serious. A common saint trades cheaply, 2 or 3 for one of the rare ones, the good ones, the cards with gold edges or a particularly dramatic martyrdom. Cecilia is always in demand. So is anyone shown doing something interesting, slaying, floating, being pierced by arrows with a serene expression, and the plain standing saints who are merely holding a book go for very little? You learn value, scarcity, and negotiation on a playground, using dead martyrs as your currency, and no adult finds this the least bit strange. Marion runs the biggest collection in the grade and guards it like a dragon on a very holy hoard. She keeps them in a cigar box her father gave her, sorted by category, and she will conduct a trade only after a long silent appraisal that makes the other child feel judged down to the soul. She once turned down 4 cards for 1, on the grounds that the 1 was Saint Sebastian and the 4 were, in her words, nobody. She was not wrong. That was the terrible thing. She was completely right. Underneath the trading, something is quietly working on you. The learning happens sideways, without a single study session. A girl who could not name 3 apostles on a test will tell you, at the fence, exactly which saint to petition for a lost mitten, a toothache, or a hopeless arithmetic grade, and which cards are worth trading 2 for 1 to get. She picked it all up in the cold, in a plaid coat, for the pure prize of the good ones, and it stuck the way nothing on a worksheet ever did. The rubber band goes back around the stack. You slide it into your pocket where it makes a small, firm rectangle against your leg all afternoon. A reassuring weight, proof of a good week. Some of these cards you will keep for decades. Turning up in a drawer or pressed inside an old missal, the colours faded now, the little saint still gazing upward at whatever he was always gazing at. And you will feel a strange pang, holding one, remembering a self who believed with total seriousness that a good spelling test could be converted, at a fair exchange rate, into a small piece of heaven you could hold in your hand. You bring your nickels to school for the cardboard box that sits at the front of the room, and the box has a purpose that feels enormous. When the class fills it to a certain amount, the money goes across the world and buys the baptism of a baby you will never meet, in a country you can barely find on the map. And then comes the reward that makes the whole room lean forward. Your class gets to choose the baby's name. You take that responsibility very, very seriously. The number is $5. $5, collected a nickel and a dime at a time, and a distant infant is baptized and saved, and most thrillingly, named by a committee of second graders in a cold classroom thousands of miles away. It is a fundraising drive with a naming reward attached, the sort of arrangement a stadium offers a millionaire, except here the donors are 7 and the naming rights are a human soul. Nobody in the room finds this odd. You find it magnificent. The box itself is a small cardboard bank, sometimes printed with a picture of the children it is meant to help, and it lives at the front of the room where you can watch its progress. Every morning brings the ceremony of the coins, children filing up to feed their nickels through the slot, the box growing satisfyingly heavier, the sister keeping a tally on the board like a thermometer creeping toward the top. A good week fills it fast. A slow week stalls it, and the stall feels almost like a small failure of the whole class's soul. And the naming is everything. When the box is full, the class gets to choose the name the baptized baby will carry, and the debate is fierce, sincere, and completely absorbing. Some children lobby for the name of the parish. Some push for a favourite saint. Some simply want to name the baby after themselves, which is voted down every time as vanity, correctly. You argue the merits of names for a distant child you will never see, and you mean every word, because to you the child is entirely real, and the stakes could not be higher. Raymond once campaigned for 3 straight days to name a pagan baby Rocky, after nothing holy whatsoever, and was overruled by Sister Mary Aloysius with a single raised eyebrow that ended the discussion the way a guillotine ends a sentence. The class settled on Anthony, patron of lost things, which several children felt was appropriate for a baby who had, in their understanding, been quite lost until their nickels found him. A certificate arrived weeks later confirming the name, and it was pinned to the board like a diploma the whole class had earned. What you are being taught, under the coins and the cheerful competition, is a very particular map of the world. The certificate comes back weeks later, on heavy paper, the baby's new name inked across it in a fine official hand, and Sister pins it to the board beside the map of the missions. You study that map at odd moments, hunting the far pink countries where your nickels went, entirely certain that somewhere down there, a real baby named Anthony is toddling around with a name your class picked out on a Tuesday. Nobody tells you it does not quite work like that. Nobody needs to. The empty box gets replaced with a fresh one. The tally on the board goes back to 0, and the whole enterprise begins again, nickel by nickel, toward the next $5 and the next name and the next certificate for the board. You feed your coin through the slot on a Monday morning, proud and warm and completely sincere, a small philanthropist in saddle shoes, entirely convinced that you and your 59 classmates are personally and regularly saving the world, one distant, renamed, imaginary baby at a time. Your mother's birthday is coming, and you are not buying her anything, because the gift you are preparing is made entirely of prayer. You sit down and you decide how many rosaries you will say for her, how many masses you will offer up, how many small sacrifices you will make in her name, and you write the totals on a decorated card. That card is the present. She will open it and read the tally, and understand that she has been given a quantity of prayer to be applied wherever her soul most needs it. This is the spiritual bouquet, and it is a completely ordinary gift in your world, given for birthdays, feast days, illnesses, and funerals with total seriousness. You make it by promising, in writing, a certain number of prayers and holy acts on someone's behalf, and you decorate the card with drawn flowers and careful Palmer lettering, because it is, after all, a bouquet, just one assembled out of devotion instead of daisies. The flowers are pictures. The gift is the promise behind them. The accounting is real and slightly dizzying. You commit to specific numbers, 10 rosaries, 5 masses attended and offered up for her, 3 visits to the Blessed Sacrament, a set of small daily sacrifices, and each of these is understood to have genuine spiritual value that transfers to the person named on the card. You are, in effect, doing devotional labour and assigning the wages to someone else, a small child working a second job whose entire salary is paid directly into your mother's account with heaven. Sister Mary Gertrude teaches you to make them properly before Mother's Day, and she is exacting about the honesty of the thing. You cannot promise 40 rosaries you have no intention of saying, because the promise is real and God is keeping the books, and a bouquet padded with prayers you never say is not a generous gift but a cheerful little fraud. So you promise what you can actually deliver, and then you have to deliver it, night after night, working off the debt of love you cheerfully signed your name to. Edward, ever practical, once tried to give the identical bouquet to both his mother and his grandmother, the same prayers counted twice, hoping to cover 2 gifts with 1 set of rosaries. Sister Mary Gertrude explained, gently but with the firmness of a woman who has audited many small souls, that a prayer offered for one person is offered for that person, and you cannot spend the same devotion in 2 places, because grace is not quite that easy to double. Edward went back and doubled his actual praying instead, which was, of course, the entire point she had been steering him toward. And here is the part that lands years later. Your mother genuinely treasures the card. A woman who could buy herself flowers, who would have been glad of a bought scarf, opens a piece of construction paper covered in a child's drawn roses and a list of prayers, and her eyes go soft, because she understands the currency exactly, and she knows what 10 rosaries costs a fidgety child at bedtime. She keeps the card in her missal. You find it there years later, the flowers faded, the numbers still legible in your careful young hand. You say your rosaries at night, working off the promise. 10 of them, spread across 10 evenings, your fingers on the beads, your mother's name held somewhere in the middle of the repetition, and you deliver every single one because you told God you would, and you have absolutely no doubt that He is counting. It is a strange gift, when you hold it up to the light, a child labouring in prayer and handing the proceeds to the people she loves. It is also, if you stop to notice, one of the odder arrangements anyone has ever proposed. A small girl converting her own bedtime boredom into grace and mailing it, prayer by prayer, to the people she loves. You are told, and you believe, that you are never actually alone. From the moment you were born, you were assigned a guardian angel, invisible and constant, standing at your shoulder through every hour of every day. The angel is meant as a comfort, a protector, someone to ask for help when you are tempted. But the angel also sees everything, every small lie, every unkind thought, every moment you thought no one was looking. And so you grow up performing your ordinary life for an audience you cannot see but never doubt. The angel arrives with a prayer you learn early. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, and the prayer frames the whole arrangement as tender, which it partly is. There is genuine comfort in believing that a bright, patient, and loving presence walks the dark hallway with you, hovers over your bed, steadies you on the stairs. On the good nights, the angel is exactly the friend the prayer promises, and you fall asleep feeling watched over in the softest sense of the word. But the same angel that comforts also reports. You are taught, plainly, that the angel witnesses your conduct, and the arithmetic is not hard for a child to complete. If the angel sees everything, then everything is seen, including the cookie, the lie, the pinch you gave your brother behind the couch, where your mother could not possibly have caught you, except she has a witness on staff. You have been assigned, from birth, your own personal, tireless, unblinking observer, and there is no room in the house it cannot enter, and no hour it takes off. So you begin performing. You are polite in empty rooms. You feel the pull to behave even when every human adult is gone, because the audience is never gone, and the habit of being watched sinks so deep that you cannot always tell any more where the angel ends and your own conscience begins. You develop the strange skill of feeling observed at all times, which is either the beginning of a moral life or the beginning of a lifelong nervous glance over the shoulder, and honestly it is hard to say which, because for you they arrive fused together. Annette took it further than most, and used to leave a small space beside her on the bench for her angel to sit, and she would not let anyone crowd that space, defending an empty 6 inches of pew with real conviction. The other children teased her for exactly one afternoon, until it occurred to several of them that she might be onto something, and that a crowded angel might not put in a good word for you, and after that a surprising number of empty inches got quietly respected all over the classroom. The surveillance is total, and it is sold to you as love, and the confusing thing is that it partly is. That is what makes it stick. A watching that meant only punishment would be easy to resent and shrug off. But this watching comes wrapped in a bedtime prayer and a promise of protection, tender and constant and genuinely sweet, so you cannot simply reject it, and you carry it internalized for the rest of your life, the sense of a gentle eye that never closes, that loves you and sees you and is always quietly keeping the account. You say the prayer before you sleep. Ever this night be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide, and you mean it, and you are comforted, and you are also, at the very same moment, filing a small, honest report on your day to the one witness you can never send out of the room. You pull the blanket up. The angel keeps its post at your shoulder, exactly where it has stood since the day you were born, and you drift off, watched over and watched, held and observed, unable to tell the two apart and no longer entirely trying. You learn to sort your wrongdoing into categories, because not all sin is the same weight. There is venial sin, which stains the soul but does not destroy it, and there is mortal sin, which kills the life of grace inside you completely. You memorize the 3 conditions that make a sin mortal, and you learn that dying with one unconfessed sends you somewhere permanent. This is not abstract to you. You are a child doing serious accounting on your own soul, sorting your days into the survivable and the catastrophic. The categories are taught with the precision of a tax code. Venial sin is the small stuff, the daily grime, the fib and the sulk and the pinch, and it dims the soul without extinguishing it, like a smudge on a window that still lets the light through. Mortal sin is the catastrophe, the sin so grave it does not smudge the window but shatters it, and a soul in that state is understood to be, quite literally, dead inside, carrying around a corpse where the life of grace used to be. You are 7, and you are being handed this distinction like a set of house keys, and there are conditions, exactly 3 recognized conditions, which you memorize the way you memorize everything, cold and complete. For a sin to be mortal, it must be grave matter, and you must know it is grave, and you must choose it anyway, with full consent. All 3, or it does not qualify, which means most of your daily sins fail the paperwork and get quietly downgraded. You find an odd, loyally comfort in the three conditions, because they mean that a great many of your worst moments were merely venial, committed in ignorance or half by accident, and did not in fact shatter anything. You become, in self-defense, a small canon lawyer of your own conscience. The trouble is that the machinery is enormous, and the operator is a child. You are not equipped to weigh grave matter. You do not know where the line runs, so you place it nervously and often in the wrong spot, treating a stolen cookie with the solemnity of a felony and lying awake wondering whether the resentment you felt toward your sister has quietly graduated from venial to mortal. The soul, in your understanding, is a delicate, accurate, and unforgiving instrument, and you have been made its bookkeeper before you can properly add. Sister Mary Ignatius draws 2 glasses of milk on the board to explain it, one clear and clean, one with a single drop of ink for venial sin, and then a third glass filled entirely with ink for mortal sin, black and ruined and undrinkable. The image is vivid and it works and it never leaves you. For years afterward you will picture your own soul as a glass of milk, checking it nervously for drops, terrified of the day it goes fully black. The earnest children take it hardest. You lie in the dark after the light is out and take honest inventory of the day, the nightly ledger keeping, the grading of your own stray thoughts as though God were marking a spelling test, the quiet certainty that the angel at your shoulder is writing everything down in a fair, clear hand. You check the corners of your conscience the way you check under the bed. It is a heavy thing to hand a person who still believes in the tooth fairy. You check your glass of milk before you sleep. You run the day backward, hunting for ink, grading each moment against the 3 conditions, deciding what is a smudge and what might be a shatter, and most nights you conclude, with real relief, that you are merely smudged and not destroyed. Then you say your prayers and sleep the sleep of the venially guilty, a soul slightly clouded but still, thank God, letting the light through, saved for one more night by a technicality you memorized in the 2nd grade. You are taught about a specific place, and it keeps you up at night. Limbo is where the souls of babies go when they die, before anyone can baptize them, an in-between country where they are not punished but are never allowed into heaven either, through no fault of their own. You are 7 years old, and you are absorbing the geography of the afterlife as plain fact, the way you absorb the names of the states. And you understand, with a child's exactness, why the sisters treat baptism as a genuine emergency. The afterlife, as you are taught it, has a map, and the map has more countries than you expected. There is heaven, obviously, the destination. There is hell, the catastrophe. There is purgatory, the waiting room with a very long line and, apparently, no chairs. And there is limbo, the strangest of all, a quiet borderland for souls who did nothing wrong and still cannot come in, a place with no pain and no punishment, and also no God, which the sisters describe as a kind of natural happiness, and which sounds, to you, unbearably lonely. The babies are what get you. Limbo is where unbaptized infants go, the ones who died before the water and the words could be applied, and they are not being punished. Everyone is very clear about that. They are simply outside forever, waiting in a place that is fine and is not heaven. You lie awake turning this over, because it does not fit the shape of fairness you thought you understood, and you are too young to be told that grown theologians argued about this exact problem for centuries and were also not entirely comfortable. What the doctrine does, in practice, is turn baptism into an emergency with a clock on it. You learn that a baby in danger of dying must be baptized immediately, and that in a true emergency anyone can do it. A nurse, a neighbour, you, with ordinary water and the right few words, no priest required. You are a small child being trained as a spiritual first responder, taught the exact procedure for saving a soul in the 60 seconds before it slips away, and you file the instructions carefully, hoping with your whole heart never to need them. Dorothy, whose baby brother had died before she was born, asked Sister Mary Ignatius directly where he was now, and the room went very still, because everyone understood the weight of the question. Sister did not flinch and did not lie to make it easier. She said the church trusted him to the mercy of God, which was the kindest true thing available and also not quite the clean answer Dorothy had come for. Dorothy nodded and sat down and kept her face steady, and several children silently added her brother to their prayers that night, just in case prayers reached that far. The cruelty of it is that no one means it cruelly. The sisters are not trying to frighten you. They are handing you the map they were handed, in good faith, believing it accurate, and believing you have a right to know the territory. But a small child cannot hold the geography of the afterlife lightly, cannot file it away as adult abstraction, and so you carry limbo around like a cold pebble in your pocket, this idea of a soft, grey, and silent nowhere full of blameless babies who will wait there, calm and fine, until the literal end of time. You say a prayer for the ones in limbo before you sleep. It is not a prayer you were assigned, because you have been told prayers cannot get them out, that the door does not work that way, but you say it anyway, because a 7-year-old cannot quite accept a place she is forbidden to help, and the praying is the only door you have. You pull the blanket up against the thought of that grey borderland, and you fall asleep grateful, without quite having the words for it, that somebody once held you over a font and said the words in time. Before you can confess, you have to remember, and remembering is its own uncomfortable exercise. You sit at your desk and you walk backward through the days since your last confession, hunting for every failure. The lies, the disobedience, the uncharitable thought about the girl 2 rows over. You are supposed to recall them not just in kind, but in number, how many times exactly, because the confession has to be complete, so you count your own small crimes on your fingers, a child taking careful inventory of everything wrong with the week. The method is formal, and Sister walks you through it like a checklist. You go down the commandments one at a time and ask yourself, against each, what you have done, and because you are small, your list is small and slightly ridiculous. You have not, as it happens, murdered anyone this week. You have not legally anyway, coveted your neighbour's ox, having no clear idea what an ox is or why you would want one. But you have disobeyed your mother, and you have told a fib about your homework, and you have been secretly delighted when your brother got in trouble, and each of these must be caught, named, and counted. The counting is the strangest part. It is not enough to know that you told lies. You are supposed to know how many, because the confession requires the number, and so you sit there trying to reconstruct the exact tally, approximately 7, possibly 8, like an accountant with a very small and very guilty ledger. Was it 3 lies or 4? Does the one you told and then immediately took back still count? You split these hairs alone at your desk, 7 years old, performing an audit of your soul with no training and enormous stakes. And then there is the terror of the missed sin. You have been taught that a confession must be complete to be good, that deliberately hiding a sin poisons the whole thing, and so a scrupulous child begins to fear the sin she cannot remember, the one hiding behind the others, the one that will make her confession secretly invalid without her knowing. The examination, meant to bring peace, instead breeds a low anxious hum, a suspicion that no matter how carefully you count, something is escaping the net. Martha, who feels everything twice as hard as anyone else, once worked herself into genuine tears at her desk, convinced she had committed a sin so terrible she could not even identify it, only sense its shadow. Sister Mary Gertrude knelt beside her and asked what she had actually done, and it emerged, after much gentle prying, that Martha had thought the word stupid at her arithmetic and not said it aloud. Sister assured her that an unspoken flash of frustration was, at absolute worst, a very small smudge, and Martha's relief was so total it was almost funny, except that everyone in the room understood the fear exactly. You have not finished. You are still 3 lies from the bottom of the week, and the minute hand above the door is already climbing toward the hour they walk you over. Around the room the others are doing the same arithmetic. Faces screwed up, fingers ticking off the week, 60 children auditing 60 small souls in total silence, while Sister waits at the front with her hands tucked into her sleeves. Somebody sniffles. Somebody has clearly found something big. The clock over the door grinds toward the hour when you will all be walked across to the church to hand the lists over in person. You finish your list and fold your hands. You have your sins ready, sorted and numbered as best your small honest arithmetic can manage, and you feel the particular readiness of a person who has done the hard, uncomfortable work of looking. In an hour you will carry the list into a dark box and hand it over. For now you sit with it, this careful inventory of a 7-year-old's failings, and you wait, lighter for having counted, and heavier for having found so much. Once a month the whole school leaves the building and walks to the church for confession, 2 by 2, in a line that stretches down the block. You go in and take a pew and you wait your turn, and the waiting is the hard part. You are rehearsing. You are running the list in your head one more time, terrified of leaving something out, watching the confessional door open and close, as the child ahead of you finishes and the next one goes in. Then the pew empties toward you. The march itself is a small public event. 60 children in uniform crossing the schoolyard and filing along the sidewalk to the parish church, silent, orderly, and slightly grim, like a very short penitential parade with no floats. The neighborhood knows what the line means. The woman sweeping her steps knows it is confession day, and she watches the procession go by with the fond, knowing look of someone who once made the same walk with the same sick feeling in the same kind of shoes. Inside, the church is dim and enormous and cool, and it swallows the sound of you. You file into the pews near the confessionals, and you kneel, and the waiting begins, and the waiting is where the whole thing lives. The line inches forward one child at a time. You can hear the low murmur behind the confessional curtain, never the words, just the rhythm of it, and the small click and slide of the priest's panel opening for the next soul, and every time it slides, you are one child closer to the dark. The pew is a slow conveyor belt of the guilty, and you are riding it forward at the unhurried pace of institutional mercy. The rehearsing is relentless. You go over your list again, and again, polishing it, terrified it will scatter the moment you kneel down in front of the priest, and the closer you get, the more slippery it becomes. Numbers you were sure of go soft. Was it 3 or 4? A brand new sin you had entirely forgotten surfaces, suddenly 2 children from the front, and now you have to fit it into the list and recount everything, your heart going faster as the pew empties and your turn walks steadily toward you across the marble floor. William, ahead of you by 3, keeps turning around to whisper that he cannot remember any sins at all. None. He is completely blank, which is its own special panic. The terror of arriving at the box with nothing to say and having to admit to the priest that you have apparently forgotten how to be bad. Sister Mary Aloysius, patrolling the aisle, stills him with one look, and William faces front and sweats it out, and you watch the back of his neck and feel, underneath your own dread, a small mean flicker of relief that at least you have a list and he does not. The genius of the monthly march is that it never lets the fear go stale. Just often enough to keep the machinery oiled, the whole school is walked to the church and made to account for itself, so that confession never becomes a distant abstraction but stays a real, recurring, slightly dreaded appointment stamped into the calendar. You learn the specific feeling of a scheduled reckoning, the low hum of a day you cannot avoid and did not choose, coming around again and again with the reliability of the seasons. The child ahead of you rises and slips behind the curtain. Now you are next, kneeling in the emptied front of the pew, your list clenched in your mind like a ticket you are afraid of dropping, watching the curtain that will part for you in about 90 seconds. The church is silent around you, vast and cool and patient, full of children rehearsing their small failures in their heads, and you take one breath and hold your sins ready, and the panel slides, and it is your turn to go into the dark and hand them over. Your turn comes and you step into a small dark wooden box and kneel, and a panel slides open, and behind a screen there is a shadow that is the priest. You begin with the words you were taught, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," and then you deliver the inventory you spent all morning assembling. He listens. He tells you what to say and how many times to say it. You come out with your penance to perform, lighter and heavier at the same time, and someone else takes your place in the dark. The box itself is a marvel of engineering aimed squarely at your nerves. It is a tall wooden cabinet with a door and a curtain and a kneeler inside, dark as a closet, smelling of old varnish and the faint ghost of everyone who knelt there before you. You go in and pull the door, and the little light disappears, and you are alone in a padded, upright and airless coffin with a screen in one wall, waiting for the shadow on the other side to finish with the sinner ahead of you and slide the panel your way. When it slides, you cannot quite see him, and he cannot quite see you, which is the whole clever point. There is a screen, sometimes a thin cloth, and behind it the vague dark shape of the priest with his head tilted toward you, close enough that you can hear him breathe. The screen is supposed to make it easier, an official anonymity, though everyone knows he knows your voice, and you know he knows, and the little fiction is maintained by both of you with great courtesy. You say your piece. The opening words, the count of days since last time, and then the list, delivered in a rush before it can escape you. I disobeyed my mother 4 times. I told 2 lies. I was uncharitable to my sister. The small crimes go out through the screen into the dark, and something remarkable happens to them there, because the shadow does not gasp or scold. He asks a gentle question, or he simply murmurs, and then he hands you a penance, a few prayers to say, and speaks the words of absolution, and the whole tally is somehow, astonishingly, wiped clean. Father Dolan is the easy one, kind and quick, and the whole school prays for his line. He gives light penances and never makes a small sinner feel like a large one, and on the mornings he is hearing confessions, the pews relax a little. The other priest, older and slower, is known to ask follow-up questions, and a child who lands in his line goes in bracing for a longer conversation, which is why there is a quiet, shameless, entirely selfish jockeying to end up on Father Dolan's side of the church. Then the words of absolution come, and something genuinely does lift. This is the part no one warns you about, that after all the dread, the actual moment of being forgiven is light as air. You went in with a week of counted failures pressing on you, and you come out with a small penance and a clean soul, and the specific buoyancy of a child who has been told with authority that it is all right now. You may begin again. You may begin again. Whatever else the box does to you, it also does that, and that is not nothing. You push the door open, and the light comes back. You walk to a pew to say your penance, 3 Hail Marys, a genuinely gentle price, and you kneel and say them and feel scrubbed and new and briefly, gloriously, without a single mark on your soul. Behind you, the next child is already stepping into the dark box with a list of her own. And you kneel in the cool, bright church saying your easy penance, lighter than you have felt all week, having handed your small sins to a shadow and received, in exchange, the astonishing gift of a clean slate. You did absolutely nothing to deserve except be afraid and tell the truth. You are 7, more or less, and this is the year you do all of it for the first time. The sisters have been preparing you for weeks, drilling the words, drilling the postures, making sure you understand what you are about to receive and what you must confess before you receive it. Your first confession comes the day before, so you can arrive clean. It is a great deal of machinery aimed at a very small person, and you feel the size of it even if you cannot name it. Everyone says this is a joyful week. The preparation is enormous and it eats the whole spring. For weeks the ordinary lessons make room for this one, and Sister Mary Gertrude drills you on the meaning of what is coming, that the wafer is not a symbol, but truly the body of Christ, a claim she states as plain fact and expects you to hold, at 7, without blinking. You practice the belief the way you practice the spelling words, until it sits in you smooth, certain, and unquestioned. And you practice the mechanics, endlessly. How to fold your hands, fingers straight and pointed up, not laced together like a child at a picnic. How to walk in the procession, slow and even, hands just so. How to open your mouth and put out your tongue for the host, far enough but not too far, and above all the iron rule that you must never ever let it touch your teeth or, God forbid, chew it. You rehearse receiving with an unconsecrated practice wafer until the choreography is flawless, a small army of 7-year-olds drilling the most delicate 90 seconds of their lives. The first confession comes first, the day before, so that you arrive at the altar with a soul freshly scrubbed. This is the very first time you have ever gone into the box, and it is its own enormous event, the debut of a lifelong practice, and the sisters coach you through your first examination of conscience with great care, because a 7-year-old's first confession is a tender and slightly comical thing, a tiny person solemnly confessing that she fought with her brother as though reporting a bank robbery. Aloysius, a serious boy who takes everything to heart, asked Sister Mary Gertrude what happened if he made a mistake during communion, if his hand shook or the host fell. She told him gently that God was not waiting to catch him out, that a nervous hand was not a sin, that the whole point of grace was that it met you where you were, trembling and all. It was, you realize much later, one of the softer things she ever said, and it slipped out like a warm current in cold water. What makes the week strange is the mismatch, the enormous machinery aimed at the very small. An entire ancient institution, with its theology and its rules and its centuries of practice, bends down and focuses all of it on a room of 7-year-olds in the 2nd grade, treating your first confession and your first communion as the genuine spiritual milestones the Church truly believes them to be. You are too young to hold the full weight of what is being handed to you, and everyone knows it, and they hand it to you anyway, carefully, because the Church would rather you grow into it than wait. So you learn your postures and you say your first sins and you get ready. The whole class does, together, drilled and coached all spring long. And the joy everyone keeps promising is real enough, threaded through with the nerves, because something genuinely large is about to happen to you, and you can feel its approach the way you feel a holiday coming. You are very small. You are about to do the most serious thing you have ever done. And you practice folding your hands one more time, fingers straight, pointed up, ready for the first time to become, in the language of your whole world, something more than a child who has only ever watched. You are dressed in white from head to foot, a small dress and a small veil, and you look, everyone tells you, like a little bride. You process into the church in a long line of children who look exactly the same, and you do the thing you have practiced 100 times, hands folded just so, tongue out, not too far, the wafer placed there, and the strict instruction that it must not touch your teeth. Cameras are waiting outside. This is the most photographed morning of your entire childhood, and you have rehearsed every second of it. The dress is the first miracle of the day. After a whole childhood in the plaid jumper, the uniform designed precisely to make you look like everyone else, you are suddenly in white, layers of it, a real dress with a veil pinned into your hair and small white gloves and shoes chosen for this one morning. The girls have dresses and veils, the boys have little suits and slicked hair, and for once the sisters are not correcting your appearance but arranging it, fussing over the fall of a veil, tender in a way that catches you off guard. The procession is slow and enormous. You walk into the church, 2 by 2 to the sound of the organ, and the whole parish turned around to watch you come, mothers already crying, fathers holding cameras, and you keep your hands folded and your eyes ahead and your walk even, because you have drilled this and you will not be the one who bolts or trips or waves at her family. You are on stage in the largest room you know, performing a slow, careful and even walk you rehearsed for weeks, and you feel every eye like warmth on your skin. Then, the moment itself, the one all the drilling was for. You reach the altar rail and kneel, and the priest comes down the line, and you tip your head back and put out your tongue exactly as practiced, and the host is laid on it, dry and thin and weightless. You close your mouth. You do not chew. You let it soften and dissolve against the roof of your mouth, and you fold your hands and return to your pew with your eyes down, and inside you feel enormous and solemn and certain that something real has just happened. Genevieve, ahead of you in line, had practiced her serene, holy, downcast expression in the mirror for a week, and was determined to look like a saint in the photographs, and she achieved it perfectly right up until her veil slipped over one eye at the rail and she had to receive her first communion looking mildly like a small pirate. She recovered with tremendous dignity, and the photograph her father took at that exact instant became a treasured family artifact precisely because it failed to be holy. What the day gives you, underneath the dress and the cameras, is a genuine sense of arrival. You have crossed a line you were pointed at for a year, and you are now, in the full understanding of your world, a person who receives, no longer merely watching the adults go up while you stay in the pew. The belonging is real, and it is sweet, and even the most nervous child feels it, the warm click of being folded fully into the thing your whole family and street and school revolve around, on a morning arranged entirely to celebrate you. Then it is outside for the photographs. You stand on the church steps in your white dress squinting into the sun, while every relative you have takes the same picture, you with your missal, you with your grandmother, the whole morning documented from every angle, because it will not come again. Someone slides the finished prints into an envelope, a small solemn child in white on a bright morning, hands folded, eyes down, certain for this 1 hour that she is in a state of perfect grace. There is only ever one morning a Catholic child dresses like that. Everybody knows it on sight. You wake up hungry, on purpose, because the rule is absolute. To receive communion in the morning you must have taken nothing since midnight, not a bite of food, not a sip of water, not even by accident. So you move through the early morning with an empty, echoing stomach, kneeling through a long Latin Mass while your body quietly complains. The hunger becomes part of the holiness somehow, a light-headed floating feeling you come to associate with the whole ritual. You will not eat until the wafer has dissolved on your tongue. The rule is called the communion fast, and it is not gentle and it is not optional. From midnight until you receive, nothing passes your lips, and the nothing is genuinely nothing, not water, not a mint, not a stray sip while brushing your teeth. You learn to brush carefully, head tilted, spitting everything out like a small bomb technician who has been fully briefed on the stakes, because even a swallow of water taken by mistake means you cannot go to communion, and not going, when the whole class is going, is its own small public sorrow you would rather starve than face. So you arrive at Mass Hollow. Your stomach has opinions and it voices them, loudly, in the quiet of the church, a long, low complaint that echoes off the marble at the exact moment the priest pauses, so that your hunger becomes, briefly, part of the liturgy. You are not alone. 60 empty children kneel in the pews and the collective growling rises like a small ungodly chorus, and everyone pretends not to hear it, which is its own daily miracle of manners. The strangest part is what the hunger does to the morning. Empty and light-headed, you go slightly floaty, the candles a touch brighter, the incense a touch thicker, the Latin washing over you while your head feels pleasantly untethered from your body. You come to associate that specific weightless, hungry and ringing clarity with holiness itself, unable to fully separate the spiritual lift from the low blood sugar, and honestly no one ever helps you separate them, because to the adults the hunger is simply the price, and the price is not up for discussion. Bernard, a large and growing boy who needs breakfast the way a furnace needs coal, once went so grey and swaying at the altar rail that Sister Mary Aloysius steered him firmly to a pew before he could tip over, and he sat with his head between his knees while the rest of the line stepped around him. He recovered by the final hymn and ate 3 breakfasts when he got home, and he wore the near faint almost proudly afterward, as though he had gone a few rounds with holiness itself and merely lost on points. The line to the rail forms at last. You rise on legs gone slightly unreliable and take your place, hollow and light and nearly there. The other children make it through on will alone, kneeling and standing and kneeling again, while the priest works through the long Latin, the growling rising and falling around the pews like surf. Every child doing the same private math about how many minutes until the wafer, and how many more until toast. Nobody complains out loud. Complaining out loud is not done. You simply wait, hollow and floating and faintly heroic, for the line to form. Then the host dissolves, and the fast breaks. After Mass there is breakfast, and it is the best breakfast of the week, earned in the oldest possible way, and you fall on it with the appetite of the truly deserving. The toast has never tasted better. The milk is a revelation. You eat like a small survivor, restored to your body, the floaty holiness fading back into ordinary Tuesday, and you carry away, without quite noticing you have learnt it, the strange durable knowledge that you can make yourself wait for a thing you want, and that the waiting, somehow, makes the having of it better. You cannot walk into the church with your head uncovered, and this is not a suggestion. Before you go through the doors you settle a veil or a small round beanie on your hair, because a female entering that space bareheaded is simply not done, at any age, ever. You keep something in your pocket or your missal for the mornings you forget, a spare, a folded square of lace, even a bobby-pinned handkerchief in an emergency. Being caught without one is a small disgrace, and disgrace, you have learned, travels fast. The rule applies to every female and only to females, which you notice early and are told not to question. Your brother walks in bareheaded, and that is correct. You walk in bareheaded, and that is a scandal. The boys, in fact, must do the opposite and take their caps off at the door, so that the same threshold demands men uncover and women cover, and you absorb the asymmetry the way you absorb everything else, as simply the shape of the world, filed without comment next to the kneel test and the separate lines. The covering itself can be many things. The proper item is a veil or a mantilla, a circle or triangle of lace that sits on the crown of your head, and the devout women of the parish own good ones, black or white, kept folded in a missal like a pressed flower. But a covering is a covering, and in a pinch the rule is satisfied by a beanie, a hat, a scarf, or, on a truly desperate morning, a handkerchief pinned into your hair with whatever you can find, because an improvised covering beats no covering, and no covering is not an option. The forgetting is the daily drama. You are young and scattered, and you leave your veil on the kitchen table roughly once a week, and the discovery always comes at the worst moment, at the very door, with the line moving and no time to run home. This is why the wise girls stash a spare, and why the truly wise carry 2, and why a folded handkerchief lives permanently in the bottom of your missal, gathering the faint smell of the pages, waiting for the morning your memory fails, which it will. Colette forgot hers on the morning of a school mass, and Finding her pocket empty and the door approaching, calmly Bobby pinned a paper napkin to the top of her head and walked in as though nothing whatsoever was unusual. It held. It was, technically, a covering. Sister Mary Aloysius gave it one long look and said absolutely nothing, because the rule had, after all, been obeyed, and Colette knelt through the entire Mass under a paper napkin with the serene composure of a girl who has found a loophole and intends to enjoy it. The heavy doors sigh shut behind the last of you, and the church settles into its cool, dim, enormous quiet. The rest of you touch your veils to check they are still there, a small reflexive pat at the crown of the head that half the pew performs at once, girls confirming their heads are covered before the priest turns around. No one questions it. No one has ever questioned it. The lace is simply part of what a girl puts on to be let through the door, filed in the same drawer as clean shoes, combed hair, and folded hands. You settle the veil and step inside. The lace sits light on your hair, barely there, a small, plain, and weightless piece of cloth doing an enormous amount of symbolic work, and you dip your fingers in the holy water and bless yourself and find your pew, properly covered, correctly female, admitted without incident. And decades from now, walking into a quiet church on a trip somewhere, you will feel your hand drift up toward your bare head out of an old reflex you cannot switch off, checking for a veil that is no longer required, put there by a rule you never once got to ask a single question about. A bishop is coming, which happens rarely, and you are being confirmed, which happens once. You choose a new name for the occasion, the name of a saint you admire, and you add it to the names you already carry. Then you kneel before the bishop in front of everyone, and at the end of the blessing he raises his hand and taps you on the cheek. It is meant to be light, symbolic, a reminder that you are now expected to suffer for the faith if you are ever asked to. You have been thinking about this tap for weeks. The bishop himself is an event. He arrives in the tall, pointed hat and the ring you are meant to kiss, trailing an air of enormous importance, and the sisters have been polishing the whole school toward his visit for a month, because a bishop does not come often and everything must be perfect when he does. You have rehearsed the procession, the responses, the kneeling, and above all, the moment at the front, until the choreography is as drilled as your first communion was, one more slow, careful, and solemn performance in the biggest room you know. The new name is the part you actually enjoy. For confirmation, you choose a saint to take as a patron, and their name becomes yours, added on, so that a girl baptized Mary Margaret walks out of the ceremony as Mary Margaret Cecilia or Mary Margaret Joan, carrying a small committee of names into the rest of her life. You pick yours with tremendous care, weighing the saints by their stories, choosing a patron the way you might choose which grown-up you most want to grow up to resemble. Then there is the slap. The bishop, completing the sacrament, touches you lightly on the cheek, a gesture the sisters explain in advance so no one is startled, and the explanation is somehow more alarming than the tap. It is a reminder, they say, that you are now a soldier of Christ, old enough to suffer for the faith, and the little tap stands in for the real blows a martyr might one day take. You are 10 years old, being gently reminded, via a pat on the face, that martyrdom is technically now on the table. Hubert, who had built the slap-up in his mind into something out of a boxing match, flinched so dramatically when the bishop's hand approached that he nearly toppled off the kneeler, bracing for a blow that turned out to be softer than his grandmother's pinch. The bishop, who had confirmed several thousand nervous children, simply steadied him with the same hand and moved on, unbothered, and Hubert spent the rest of the day insisting it had been much harder than it looked, a claim no one who had watched him nearly fall over was prepared to accept. Down the long row of kneeling children the bishop moves steadily, a tap, a blessing, a tap, working through the whole, nervous, second grade. You walk back to your pew a soldier of Christ, 10 years old, your new saint's name still strange in your mouth, and you kneel and fold your hands and try hard to feel the enormous change you were promised. Mostly you feel your knees on the wood, the itch of your good collar, and a powerful hope that the bishop moves on down the line before he can look at you too closely. Whatever was transferred to you does not announce itself. You kneel, and the tap comes, and it is nothing. After all the weeks of imagining, the actual touch is feather-light, gone in an instant, and you rise with a new name and a sealed soul, and a slightly deflated sense of anticlimax, because you had braced for something enormous and received something gentle, but the name stays. Cecilia, or Joan, or whichever saint you chose, rides quietly inside your full name for the rest of your life, surfacing on official documents and wedding certificates, a small permanent souvenir of the morning a bishop patted your cheek and called you a soldier. You are expected to carry a whole library of prayers in your head, ready to produce on request. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Act of Contrition, the Apostles' Creed, all of it memorized so thoroughly that you can begin the instant Sister names one. She might stop the lesson cold and ask you to recite the Act of Contrition from memory, and there is no book to open, no notes to check. The prayer is supposed to already be in you, complete, the way your own address is. You practice until the words run without thought. The collection is large and it grows every year. First the short ones, the Our Father and the Hail Mary and the Glory Be, drilled until they are as automatic as breathing. Then the longer, stranger ones, the Apostles' Creed with its marching list of beliefs, the Act of Contrition with its careful old-fashioned phrasing, the Confiteor, the morning offering, the prayers before and after meals. By the time you are 10, you carry a whole liturgy in your head, a vast, ordered and permanent library shelved so deep you could recite half of it in your sleep, and occasionally your mother swears, "You do." The strange thing is how the words arrive before the meaning. You learn the Act of Contrition as pure sound long before you understand a phrase like "firmly resolve with the help of thy grace," and you say the whole thing perfectly while grasping perhaps half of it, the meaning slowly seeping into the memorized shell over years. You are running advanced theology through your mouth at an age when you still believe the moon follows the car, and nobody finds the gap between the words and your understanding worth worrying about. The Act of Contrition is the one that carries the most weight, because it is the one you need in the box. You say it at the end of every confession, and so it has to be genuinely ready, genuinely instant, because fumbling it in front of the priest with your sins freshly confessed is a small nightmare you rehearse against. So you practice that one hardest. The words of sorrow worn smooth as a stone from a river, ready to pour out the moment the priest gives the signal, your reliable closing argument in the case of your own small soul. Rosemary blanked on the creed once, called on cold in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, and got 3 lines in before the whole thing simply evaporated from her head, leaving her standing there with her mouth open and her eyes going wide. Sister Mary Vincent let the silence stretch just long enough to teach the lesson, then fed her the next word, one word, and the whole prayer came flooding back at once. You all filed that away. You went home and drilled the creed again that night, because you had seen exactly how the trapdoor opened and you did not care to stand on it yourself. Underneath the drill, the memorizing is handing you a set of words for the wordless moments. Years later, in the worst hours of your adult life, in hospital corridors and at gravesides, and in the dark at the bottom of the night, these prayers will surface on their own, unbidden, running through you in your own child voice, and you will be quietly grateful to have them, a set of rails to hold when nothing else is steady. The drilling felt mechanical at 7. It turns out to have been installing something you would need. Sister names a prayer, and you begin. The words come without being summoned, rising up complete and in order, and you deliver them clean while barely thinking, your mouth doing the work your memory laid down years ago. It is a strange skill, this instant recall of ancient words, drilled into you before you understood a syllable of it, and it stays, long past everything else, so that you will carry these exact prayers, in this exact order, all the way to the end, produced on command by a self you stopped being decades ago. You hold a string of beads and you say the same prayers over and over, and the repetition is the entire point, not a flaw in it. The rosary moves in cycles, a decade of Hail Marys for every larger bead, and your fingers learn to keep the count without your eyes. The whole class prays it together sometimes, 60 small voices grinding through the same rhythm until the words stop being words and become a kind of motion. You are being taught that comfort can come from repetition, that saying it again is not the same as wasting it. The beads themselves are a small treasure. You have your own rosary, kept in a little pouch or a tin. The beads may be glass, maybe wood, maybe cheap plastic that clacks, and you learn its geography by feel. The big beads and the small, the medal in the middle, the crucifix at the end. Your fingers walk it in the dark, 1 bead per Hail Mary, so that the counting happens in your hands and frees your mouth to pray and your mind to drift toward whatever the mystery of the day is meant to be. The repetition is the thing outsiders never understand and you never question. 10 Hail Marys in a row, then again and again, 5 times over. The same word said 50 times, and to a stranger it sounds like empty parroting. But to you it is the opposite of empty. The words wear a smooth groove, and the mind settles into the groove, and somewhere around the 3rd decade the prayer stops being a task and becomes a kind of rocking, a rhythm that holds you, calm, steady, and endless, the way waves hold a boat. When the whole class prays it aloud together, something odd and lovely happens to the sound. 60 children reciting in unison do not stay quite in step, so the Hail Marys blur at the edges, overlapping, a low, continuous murmur with no clear beginning or end, and you can float on it, half saying the words and half just carried by the tide of everyone else saying them. It is the most peaceful the room ever gets, this droning collective prayer, 60 restless children briefly turned into one quiet, rhythmic, breathing thing. Agnes prays hers so fast that she laps the entire class, fingers flying over the beads, the words compressed into a rapid holy blur, finishing her decade while everyone else is still in the middle of theirs, and she looks up serene and slightly smug at the end like a runner who has broken the tape early. Sister Mary Gertrude finally told her, kindly, that the rosary is not a race and that God is in no particular hurry, and Agnes slowed down by perhaps 10%, which everyone agreed was a genuine spiritual concession on her part. Underneath the counting, the beads do something a lecture never could. They wear a groove, and the groove holds you. By the 50th Hail Mary the words have gone soft and automatic, and your mind, released from the effort of them, drifts and settles the way silt goes still in a shaken jar. Sister Mary Gertrude calls this prayer. Your body experiences it as the closest thing to rest the whole school day offers. 60 children rocking gently on the same tide of the same worn sentence. A thing said 1,000 times, you learn in your hands before your head, does not wear thin, it wears smooth. The last bead comes, and the loop closes. You finish where you began, at the crucifix, the whole circle completed, and you sit for a moment in the particular calm the beads always leave behind, your fingers stilled, your mind quiet, the murmur fading out of the room. You slide the rosary back into its pouch, and you carry away, without being told you have learned it, the strange, steadying knowledge that comfort can be manufactured on demand, out of nothing but the same few words and a string of beads and the willingness to say them again and again and again. You wear things under your uniform that no one can see, and they are there to protect your soul, not your body. A scapular, 2 small squares of brown wool joined by strings, rests against your chest and your back, and you have been promised that dying while wearing it carries a spiritual guarantee. There might be a medal too, a saint on a chain, or a blessed pin. You get dressed each morning, layering the ordinary and the sacred together, cotton and wool and salvation, and you rarely think about how strange the arrangement would look explained aloud. The scapular is the strangest and the most cherished of them. 2 little rectangles of brown cloth, no bigger than postage stamps, connected by 2 strings, so that one square hangs on your chest and the other down your back, worn under the clothes against the skin. It is not decorative, it is functional, in the way you understand function, and the function is enormous, because the promise attached to it is that whoever dies wearing the brown scapular will not be lost. You are carrying, in effect, a small woolen insurance policy on your eternal soul, and you never take it off. The medals do similar work in a smaller way. A miraculous medal on a thin chain, a St. Christopher for travel, a little oval of St. Anthony, each blessed by a priest, each carrying its own quiet protection, worn under the blouse where they warm to your skin and clink faintly when you run. You know which saint does what, and you assemble your own personal defense accordingly. A small child walking around wearing a carefully chosen... What makes it powerful is that it is secret and constant. Nobody at school can see your scapular, and that is the point. It is between you and heaven, worn under everything else, a private, secret, and constant arrangement carried through the whole ordinary day. You feel the little squares shift when you move, a soft reminder that you are wrapped, protected, accounted for, that a plan is in place for you no matter what the afternoon holds. The wool gets grubby and frayed with wear, and a worn-out scapular is not thrown away but respectfully replaced, the old one burned or buried, never simply tossed in the trash like an ordinary rag. Leonard once lost his scapular in a rough game at recess, the string snapping, the little brown squares vanishing into the trampled grass, and he searched for it with a genuine low panic that the other boys mistook for ordinary lost property until they understood what it was and, one by one, got down in the grass to help him look. They found it muddy and intact, and Leonard retied it under his shirt with the shaky relief of a person who had briefly, accidentally, let his eternal coverage lapse. The scapula itches in the closed heat of the classroom, and you resist the urge to scratch at it through your blouse. When something frightens you, a thunderclap, a hard question, the big dog on the corner, your hand goes to the medal under your collar without your deciding it should, a small, warm oval you press between two fingers until the fear passes. You do not think of it as theology. You think of it as the thing you touch, worn so long against your skin that a bare neck, on the rare morning you forget it, feels faintly and specifically undefended. You dress in the dark most mornings, and the scapula goes on first. Before the blouse, before the jumper, before any of the visible obedient layers the school will inspect, the two small squares of brown wool settle against your skin where no ruler will ever measure them, doing their quiet, enormous job, and you button your uniform over the top and walk out into the day fully dressed in both senses, correct on the outside for the sisters and covered on the inside for God, wearing your salvation where nobody can see it, and you can never forget it. It is May, and the whole school is preparing for the one ceremony that turns a schoolgirl into something briefly like royalty. A statue of the Blessed Mother waits to be crowned with fresh flowers, and one girl gets chosen to climb the little ladder and place the wreath on Mary's head while everyone sings. You bring flowers from home, lilacs and peonies cut that morning, damp and heavy in your arms. Being the girl who crowns Mary is an honour talked about for the rest of the year. You know exactly who was chosen, and it was not you. May is Mary's month, and the whole building tilts toward her for 30 days. There are extra devotions, extra hymns, the smell of lilacs drifting through the halls, and building over all of it toward the May crowning, the ceremony where a statue of the Blessed Mother is crowned with real flowers in front of the entire school. It is the most beautiful thing that happens all year, and the sisters, usually so severe, go almost soft in the planning of it, arranging flowers and rehearsing songs with a tenderness that surprises you every spring. The flowers come from everywhere. You are told to bring blossoms from home, and so the morning of the crowning the whole school arrives carrying armfuls of whatever the backyards and window boxes are offering, lilacs, peonies, early roses, lily of the valley, snapped off wet with dew and clutched to your chest through the walk to school. The classroom fills with the heavy sweet smell of cut flowers going slowly warm, and for one morning the room that usually smells of chalk and floor wax smells like a garden that has come indoors to pray, and the crowning itself is genuine theatre. The chosen girl, dressed in her first communion white, carries the crown of flowers up a small ladder to the statue while the whole school sings the old hymns, bring flowers of the rarest, "O Mary, we crown thee with blossoms today," and she sets the wreath on Mary's plaster head with the care of someone handling something that might break. It is slow and solemn and lovely, and it lodges in you as one of the few moments in the whole year that is pure beauty with no fear attached to it at all. The honour of being the one who crowns is enormous, and it is not random. It goes to a girl chosen for her piety, her conduct, her general goodness, and this year it went to Veronica, who is genuinely, annoyingly, effortlessly good, and who accepted the honour with a modest downward glance that made you want to be happy for her and mostly were. You carried your lilacs up to the pile with everyone else and told her it was wonderful, and you meant it, mostly, which is the most honest kind of meaning there is. Even from the crowd, the crowning shows you a gentler face of the whole enormous thing. So much of your religious life is fear and counting and correction, and then May comes, and the flowers come, and for one morning the faith is simply lovely, warm, and kind, with nothing to confess and nothing to fear. You need that morning. You do not have the words for why, but you feel the whole school lean into it, hungry for the sweetness, and you carry the smell of the lilacs home in your empty arms. The hymn ends, and Mary stands crowned above the flowers. The statue looks down over the heaped blossoms with her small plaster smile, wreathed now in lilac and peony, and the whole school looks up at her in a rare shared hush that has no dread in it, only a kind of collective tenderness. 60 restless children gone briefly, genuinely, completely still. Then the sisters click the class back into lines, and the ordinary day resumes, and the flowers slowly wilt over the following week. But for that one morning in May, the strict cold machine of your whole childhood turned, briefly and completely, into something that felt like love. You open your lunch on a Friday and there is no meat in it, because on Friday meat is not merely skipped, it is forbidden under actual sin. The whole family eats this way, and the whole school eats this way, so your lunch pail holds a fish sandwich or macaroni or a boiled egg, and so does everyone else's. You have absorbed the rule so completely that a slice of ham on the wrong day would feel genuinely dangerous, not just against the menu but against the order of the universe. Friday has a taste, and the taste is fish. The rule is simple and total. No meat on Fridays, and no meat means no meat, not a slice of bologna, not a scrap of bacon, not the ham you can smell coming from the public school kids 2 blocks over who are allowed to eat whatever they please, and who you regard, at lunch on Fridays, with a small, confused and weary pity. Fish is permitted, eggs are permitted, cheese is permitted, and so the Friday lunch pail across the entire parish converges on the same short list of options, 60 children unwrapping variations on the same meatless theme. What makes it stick is that it is not just a school rule, but the shape of the whole week at home. Your mother plans around it, the Friday supper built on fish or a cheese casserole or macaroni, and the fish itself has become a small institution, the whole neighbourhood buying it on Thursday and cooking it on Friday until the smell of frying fish on a Friday evening is simply what Friday smells like, drifting identical out of every kitchen window on the block. The stakes, you understand, are real. Eating meat on Friday is not a slip of the diet, but a genuine sin, a deliberate breaking of a rule the Church has attached real weight to, and so the meatless Friday is not a preference you could set aside, but an obligation you carry, backed by the same machinery that runs the confessional. A child does not sneak a hot dog on a Friday any more than she would sneak into the tabernacle. The rule lives at that level, woven into the fear and the order of everything else. Stanley tested it exactly once, trading his Friday egg salad for half of a classmate's forbidden ham sandwich behind the coat racks, and he ate it fast and guilty, and spent the entire afternoon convinced he could feel the sin sitting in his stomach like a stone. He confessed it the following week with the gravity of a man turning himself in for a serious crime, and Father Dolan, who had heard approximately everything, gave him a gentle penance, and Stanley swore, very nearly laughed, which somehow made Stanley feel both forgiven and slightly foolish. Stanley never trades for ham again. By Thursday evening, the whole parish is buying fish, the market crowded with women choosing the same cod and haddock, and by Friday noon the smell of it frying drifts out of every kitchen window on the block, identical house to house, so that the air itself keeps the rule. The public school lets out smelling of hamburger. The two smells meet at the corner and do not mix, and you know your side of the corner by the smell alone. You finish your fish sandwich and fold the wax paper. Around you 60 children are finishing their own meatless lunches, the whole room converted for 1 day a week to the same short menu, and none of you find it strange, because it is simply Friday, and Friday is simply like this. You fold your wax paper into a small neat square, the way you were taught, and tuck it back into the pail for tomorrow. The boy across the aisle is trading his egg for a cheese sandwich, a legal Friday transaction. Somewhere down the block, a kitchen has already started thawing the evening's fish. You already go to Mass every Sunday, and then there are the other days, scattered through the calendar, when you must go again. Holy days of obligation, the sisters call them, and missing one is not laziness, it is sin. So certain Thursdays and odd midweek mornings you find yourself back in the pew in your uniform, kneeling through the Latin before the school day even begins. You learn the calendar of obligation the way other children learn baseball schedules, knowing well in advance which weeks will demand an extra trip to the church. The days themselves have grand old names that mark the great events of the faith. The Assumption in August, All Saints in November, the Immaculate Conception in December, Christmas of course, and a scattering of others. Each one a day the Church declares important enough that attending Mass is not optional but required, on pain of the same sin as skipping a Sunday. You memorize which they are, because ignorance is not much of a defense, and a holy day sails toward you whether or not you are paying attention. The inconvenience is the whole texture of it. A holy day that lands on a weekday means Mass gets bolted onto a morning that was already full, so you rise earlier, dress in the dark, and walk to the church before school for a service. Most of the adult world is skipping, because most of the adult world is not Catholic, and has no idea the day is holy at all. You kneel through it hungry and half awake, and then you file straight from the church into the school day, doubled up, weary, obligated, and martyred. What strikes you, even young, is how invisible these days are outside your own world. The Assumption is enormous inside the parish and does not exist at all across the street, where the shops are open and the buses run and nobody has risen early to kneel. You live on a calendar laid over the ordinary one, a second set of important days that only your kind can see, and you move through a city that is busily ignoring a day you have been told is too holy to skip. It gives you an early, odd sense of belonging to something both large and strangely private. Cyril, ever the optimist, floated the theory that a holy day of obligation ought to mean a day off from school, since it was clearly a special day, and was gently informed by Sister Mary Vincent that the obligation was to attend Mass, not to be excused from arithmetic, and that God and the multiplication tables could both, in fact, be served on the same morning. Cyril took this hard. He had genuinely believed he had found a loophole, and instead he had merely found more church stacked directly on top of an ordinary Tuesday. You file into the pew in the half-dark with your coat still buttoned, and kneel for a Mass the rest of the city is sleeping straight through. You learn the shape of the coming year the way you learn the bus routes, knowing months ahead which ordinary Tuesday will be interrupted by an Assumption or an All Saints, which week will demand the early walk and the empty stomach and the extra kneeling. The Immaculate Conception sits in December like a small obligation-shaped stone you can feel coming from October. The nuns do not have to remind you. The calendar does its own reminding, the extra Mass ends, and you file out into the ordinary day. You walk from the quiet of the church into a street going briskly about its unholy business, buses and shops and people who never knew the day was different. And you carry your small private obligation back to the classroom where arithmetic is waiting exactly as Sister Vincent promised. You have done the required thing. You have kept the day. And you walk back into the ordinary morning carrying a service the rest of the street will never know happened. Once a year, a season arrives that is built entirely around going without, and you participate whether you want to or not. On the first day, you kneel and a thumb presses a cross of dark ash onto your forehead, and you are told plainly that you are dust and will return to it. Then for weeks you give something up, a candy, a pleasure, a small daily comfort, and you walk the stations around the church on Fridays. You are a child practicing sacrifice on purpose, learning that doing without is a thing you can offer up. It begins with the ashes. On Ash Wednesday, the whole school files up and the priest marks each forehead with a smudged cross of grey ash and says the words, "Remember that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return," to a room full of 7-year-olds who receive this news about their own mortality with remarkable calm. You wear the smudge all day, on your forehead, out into the street, a visible mark that announces to the whole world exactly what you are and what season it is, and you are told not to wash it off. Then comes the giving up. For the 40 days of Lent, you choose something to sacrifice, and the choosing is a small, serious negotiation with yourself, because it has to be real, it has to cost you something. Candy is the classic. So is dessert, or the radio program you love, or the habit of complaining, if you are feeling ambitious and slightly doomed. You give it up for the whole season, and every time you want the thing and do not take it, you are meant to offer that small A-cup, converting your denied sweet tooth into a tiny deposit of grace. The stations of the cross fill the Fridays. You process around the inside of the church, stopping at each of the 14 images of Christ's slow walk to his death, praying at every one, and it is long, solemn, and quietly punishing, and the whole grim journey is laid out in pictures on the walls you have stared at your entire life. It is not cheerful. It is not meant to be. Lent is the one season that does not pretend, that sits you down in the sorrow and the dust and asks you to stay there a while. Rupert gave up candy every single year and cracked every single year, usually around the 3rd week, discovered with chocolate evidence at the corner of his mouth and a look of profound theological failure on his face. He would confess the broken sacrifice, renew it, and break it again, an annual cycle so reliable that the other children took to gently asking him, around week 3, how the candy was going, purely to watch his conscience visibly collapse. He never once made it to Easter. He never once stopped trying. Rupert makes it to the 3rd week before the chocolate finds him again. Everyone else white-knuckles it too, eyeing the candy dish at a neighbour's house, turning down the offered cookie with a small martyr's pride, keeping the private tally of days survived. On Fridays, you walk the stations after school, stopping at each image along the cold wall, genuflecting, rising, moving to the next, your knees learning the whole slow circuit of it. Lent does not pretend to be fun. It is the one season that sits you down in the plain, hard fact of going without. The ash fades from your forehead by evening. You catch sight of it in a shop window on the walk home, the grey cross already smudging at the edges, and you leave it, because you were told to, wearing your mortality out into an ordinary afternoon, like the most natural thing in the world, and you carry the giving up through the long weeks toward Easter, denying yourself your small sweet thing over and over, a child in a plaid coat practicing, in miniature, the enormous and lifelong art of wanting something and choosing, on purpose, to wait. You are told which films are safe and which are forbidden, and the judgment does not come from your parents. It comes from an official list that rates every movie in the country, and once a year you stand in church and pledge out loud to obey it. A film with a wrong rating is simply off limits, and everyone knows which ones those are, which somehow makes them more interesting, not less. You grow up understanding that entertainment itself is supervised, that even the picture show has an authority sitting quietly above it, keeping score. The authority is the Legion of Decency, a Catholic organization that watches every film Hollywood produces and sorts them by letter for your protection. There is the rating that means fine for everyone, the one that means acceptable for adults, and the dreaded final letter, the one that means condemned, a picture no Catholic is permitted to see under threat of sin. The list is published and read from the pulpit, and a condemned film in a Catholic neighborhood plays to a suspiciously empty theater, boycotted by an entire population before it has sold a single ticket. The pledge is the part that makes it stick. Once a year, the whole congregation stands and recites the Legion pledge together, promising aloud to avoid the condemned films and to stay away from theatres that make a habit of showing them. And you say the words along with everyone, binding yourself for another year to a list you have not read and mostly will not need. It is a strange thing to promise, out loud, in church, that you will let a committee decide your Saturday afternoons, and yet you promise it without a flicker, because everyone around you is promising it too. What the condemning does, of course, is exactly what condemning always does. The forbidden films become the fascinating ones. A picture nobody is allowed to see acquires an instant dark glamour, whispered about precisely because it is off limits, and the older kids trade rumours about what could possibly be in it that got it condemned, their imaginations supplying scandals far worse than anything the actual film contains. The Legion, trying to close a door, hangs a small glowing sign on it that reads, "Look here." Ignatius, whose uncle was gloriously indifferent to the whole system, once saw a condemned film at a downtown theatre with that uncle and returned to school a minor celebrity, interrogated at recess by a ring of children desperate to know what a forbidden movie was actually like. He reported, with the solemnity of an explorer back from a dangerous land, that it had been mostly people talking and one long kiss, and the crowd was visibly disappointed, having expected something closer to the end of the world. The forbidden thing, examined up close, was mostly just a movie. Threaded through the ratings and the pledge is a quieter lesson. Someone is always watching what you watch. So you sit in the dark of the Saturday matinee with a small new awareness at the back of your neck, a sense that the picture on the screen was graded by someone in an office and stamped before you bought your ticket. The cartoon is safe. The newsreel is safe. And the poster for next week's feature, the one with the letter you were taught to fear, waits in its glass case in the lobby, quietly forbidden, which guarantees you memorize its title on the way out. The pledge ends, and the congregation sits back down. You have promised for another year to let a list decide what you may and may not see, and you file the promise away next to all the other obediences stacked inside you, and you go home and listen to the radio, which the Legion does not rate, and which is therefore, gloriously, all yours. And you carry out of that church one more quiet certainty, that even your amusements are watched from above, that there is no corner of your life, not even the picture show on a Saturday, that some patient authority has not already thought about, sorted, and stamped. You share a school with boys, and you are kept almost entirely apart from them by careful and constant design. Different sides of the room, different doors into the building, different sections of the yard, different lines for everything. The separation is maintained so thoroughly that a boy from your own grade can feel like someone from a distant country. You are not told exactly why the distance matters so much, only that it does, and that closing it is the kind of thing the sisters watch for with particular attention. So the gap stays wide and quiet. The separation is built into the architecture of the day. The boys enter by one door and you by another. They sit on one side of the classroom and you on the other, with an invisible border down the middle that no one crosses casually. At recess the yard divides, boys to their half, girls to theirs, and even the lines to come back inside are separate, so that a whole school day can pass in which you exchange not one word with half your own classmates, the ones who happen to be boys. The reasons are never spelled out, which somehow makes them louder. No sister sits you down to explain why the distance matters, so you absorb it as simply the shape of things, the way you absorb the veils and the kneel test, one more rule that arrives fully formed and expects no questions. But you feel the particular seriousness attached to this one, the extra sharpness in a sister's attention when a boy and a girl drift too close, and you understand, without being told, that this border is somehow more important than the others. What it produces is a strange, charged unfamiliarity. The boys become slightly mysterious precisely because they are kept at a distance, a whole category of people your own age whom you observe across a divided yard but rarely actually know. You learn them as a group, loud, fast, and forever in trouble, without learning them as individuals, and the artificial gap fills up with all the curiosity that a gap of that kind always fills up with, which is, in the end, exactly the curiosity the whole arrangement was built to prevent. Augustine and a girl named Pauline were caught simply talking, once, heads together over a shared book at the edge of the wrong side of the yard, doing nothing on earth but comparing homework, and were separated by Sister Mary Aloysius with a swiftness that suggested she had spotted something far more dangerous than arithmetic. Nothing had happened. Nothing was going to happen. But the speed of the intervention taught the whole yard more about the seriousness of the border than any lecture could have, and Augustine and Pauline did not compare homework again. Augustine and Pauline never compare homework again. The boys stay a rumour across the yard, a category you observe from your own half without ever quite meeting. You know their names and almost nothing else. When one of them is sent to your side to carry a message from the other classroom, the whole girl's half goes briefly, electrically quiet, 60 heads tracking a single boy across foreign ground until he escapes back to his own line, and then the noise closes over the gap again as though he had never crossed it. The recess whistle blows, and the yard divides on its own. Boys drift to their half and girls to theirs without anyone having to say a word. The border so deeply learned by now that it maintains itself, an invisible wall held up by pure habit down the centre of an ordinary schoolyard. And you play your games on your side, in your half of the noise, glancing occasionally across the divide at the loud, mysterious others you have somehow shared a building with for 8 years and been kept, the entire time, a careful and deliberate arm's length away from. You are let outside to play, and even the playing has an order to it that everyone obeys without being told twice. The jump rope turns and the rhymes that go with it are fixed, passed down unchanged, and there is a right way to wait your turn and a wrong way to cut the line. A whistle or a clap can freeze the entire yard in an instant, and it does. Recess is freedom, but it is a supervised freedom, watched from the edge, and you learn to have your fun inside the lines that are already drawn. The games run on rules older than any of you. The jump rope rhymes are handed down intact from girls who have long since graduated, chanted exactly as they were taught, and you learn them without ever being formally taught, absorbing the words and the rhythm from the bigger girls the way you absorb everything, by standing near it long enough. There is a correct way to turn the rope, a correct moment to jump in, and a genuine social penalty for the girl who misses her timing and tangles the whole thing. The hierarchy is real and entirely invisible to adults. Certain girls control the good games, decide who jumps and who turns, who is in and who waits, and they wield this small power with all the seriousness of a queen granting audiences. To be let into the fast rope with the big girls is a promotion. To be left turning the rope endlessly while others jump is a quiet demotion, and the whole delicate order sorts and resorts itself every single recess, a society governing itself in the 15 minutes. The sisters are watching from the steps, but not truly listening. And the sisters are always watching. Recess is freedom, but it is freedom inside a fence with a nun posted at the edge of it, and the whistle in her hand can end everything in a single blast. One sharp note and the entire yard freezes, Mid-jump, mid-chant, mid-argument, 60 children turned instantly to statues, and then a second whistle sends you into your lines. You play hard in the small window you are given, always half aware of the figure at the edge, your fun real, bounded, and closely supervised, wild inside a very clear set of lines. Priscilla ran the best jump rope in the yard with an iron and slightly terrifying fairness, and her one unbreakable law was that everyone got a turn, enforced against bigger girls who tried to hog the rope with a glare that could stop them cold. She was not gentle about it. She was just. Under her rule, the game ran smoothly for a whole spring, and when she finally missed a jump and had to take the rope herself, she did it without complaint, because the law was the law and she had written most of it. The jump rope slaps the asphalt in its steady double beat, and the rhyme that goes with it has not changed in 20 years. The whole yard runs on rules nobody wrote down. Who turns and who jumps, whose turn comes next, what counts as a fair miss, which patch of asphalt belongs to which game. Disputes flare and get settled on the spot, by the older girls, by the loudest, by a rough justice that somehow lands mostly fair. The sisters watch from the steps and almost never step in, because the children are governing themselves, badly and beautifully, in the 1/4 hour of the day nobody scripts for them. The whistle blows, and the yard freezes. The rope stops turning, the rhyme cuts off mid-word, and 60 children hang suspended for one instant before folding themselves back into the lines that will carry them inside. You are breathing hard, your palms stinging from the rope, your small, complicated society dissolved in an instant back into an orderly file of pupils. And you walk in having had, for 15 loud bounded minutes, the closest thing to freedom the day offers, a freedom you spent, like children always do, building rules of your very own. You walk home through a neighbourhood where you cannot disappear, because it is a parish, and a parish knows its own. The woman on the stoop knows your mother. The man at the corner store knows which family you belong to, and if you misbehaved at school, the news can reach your kitchen before you do. Complaining at home about a punishment rarely helps, because at home the sister is assumed to be right, and taking her side against you is simply what is done. So you carry the whole day's account back with you, and you settle it quietly. The parish is small, and it is everything. It is not just the church, but the whole tight grid of streets around it, the families who fill the pews, the shops run by people who kneel next to you on Sunday, the priests and sisters who know your parents by name and your grandparents by memory. You are not an anonymous child moving through a city. You are a known quantity, placed and accounted for, the daughter of that family, from that street, in that grade, and the placement follows you everywhere you go inside its borders. What this means, practically, is that you are always in view. There is no version of the walk home where you are truly unobserved, because the whole route is lined with people who know exactly who you are, watching from stoops and shop counters with the fond, proprietary, faintly nosy attention of neighbours who consider your conduct partly their business. Cut through a yard, say a word you should not, and someone sees, and someone knows your mother, and the two facts have a way of finding each other by supper time. The network runs on adults who feel entirely entitled to correct you. Any grown-up in the parish can tell you to straighten up, and will, and reporting it at home earns you no sympathy, because that adult also kneels on Sunday, and is therefore assumed to be right. You grow up inside a web of interlocking supervision, school and church and street and home, all pointed the same direction, and all comparing notes, a single seamless authority with no gap in it anywhere a child might slip through unseen. Missus Kowalski, who missed nothing from her front window, once watched you take the long forbidden shortcut across her neighbour's grass and mentioned it to your mother at the vegetable market before you had even finished your walk home, so that you arrived to a kitchen that already knew, a small everyday miracle of parish intelligence that convinced you, for years, that the adults had some faster way of talking than you had been told about. They did. It was called the sidewalk, and it never stopped running. Underneath all the watching is the other half of the same fact. You belong to something that will never quite let you go. The surveillance is total, and the belonging is total, and they are the same thing wearing two faces, because the same web that watches you also holds you, feeds you when there is trouble, knows your name when you are lost, catches you when you fall in ways you will not appreciate until you are grown and living somewhere no one knows you at all. You will spend part of your life escaping that closeness, and part of your life aching for it. You reach your own front steps at last. The whole day comes home with you, The line and the catechism and the ruler and the flowers, the whole account carried back through streets that watched you walk it, and you climb the steps into a kitchen that is warm, knowing, and already half aware of how your day went. You are 7 years old, and you are held so tightly by so many hands that you cannot fall far in any direction. It will feel, some days, like a cage. It will feel, on the cold ones, like the safest place on earth. And for now, it is simply home, at the end of a long parish street, where everyone, always, knows your name. So there you have it. You spent the night kneeling on a wooden floor so a woman could measure your hem, memorizing the exact reason you were made, feeding your nickels to a cardboard box to buy a stranger a name, and confessing a whole week of very small crimes, by kind and by number, to a shadow behind a screen. You wore your salvation under your blouse and your mortality on your forehead, and you learned to move your whole body on the click of a little wooden cricket. The girls who actually lived this are grandmothers now, or gone, and most of them carried the whole strange machine out of that building and into the rest of their lives. The lovely looping handwriting and the flinch at the word kneel, side by side, forever. The prayers that still surface in the dark. The small saved seat left beside them for an angel they were promised at birth and never quite stopped believing in. It was a hard, tender, contradictory way to raise a child. All fear and flowers in the same building, a ruler on the desk, and lilacs heaped at the feet of a plaster Mary in the same cold spring. The people who ran it mostly meant it kindly, and mostly believed every word, and handed you a whole map of heaven and a fountain pen in the same second grade year, trusting you to grow into the size of it. Thank you for spending this quiet stretch of the night here with me, walking one more time down a parish street where everyone knew your name. There is nothing left to memorize now, no list to rehearse, no finger about to point your way, so let your hands unfold. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the blanket lie heavy and warm, and let your eyes fall closed all on their own, with nothing at all required of you tonight. No bell, no whistle, no clicker waiting in a deep black pocket. You kept the day. You may rest now. Sleep well.